the pocket, launches to the end zone. Touchdown chase!
And it's Donovan Fields on the carry. Watch out! Justin Fields!
There he is, Pitts. Room service. Welcome back, Kyle Pitts.
Welcome in to PFF's 2021 NFL Draft Recap Show. We are not going anywhere. Every single player picked in the 2021 NFL Draft, all 257 picks. There were originally 259, 2 forfeited. It's a big trivia question there. We are going to grade every single draft class. That's live on PFF.com right now. PFF's draft grades for every single draft class. And today, we're going to go by division, every single draft class, and offer a grade. Should be fun. And at the end, we're going to pick who wins this division. Who's going to win each division. Should be quite the treat here. And at the back end of the show, we're going to do bold rookie predictions, maybe some O-Roy, D-Roy talk, even though it's kind of chalky right now with Trevor Lawrence and Micah Parsons. Still going to be interesting conversation here. We're going to start with the AFC South. Let's just get right into it. I mean, we don't have a lot of time here. We've been here for what? We've been here a lot, man. 20 hours of live coverage. I'm ready to rip it up. AFC South Draft Recap. Let's go ahead and start, Mike, with the Jacksonville Jaguars. You gave them a grade of a B+. B+, your take on the Jacksonville Jaguars draft, your favorite picks, your least favorite picks, and why the B+ grade?
Yeah, I mean, Trevor Lawrence, obviously, like that fell into their lap. There's no decision to be made there, but once they did start making decisions, Travis Etienne, we're obviously going to push back on drafting a running back in the first round. If you're tuning in, that's no surprise to you. But then the Tyson Campbell pick, a reach on our board, one of the bigger ones in the draft, 108th on our draft board. But then we like the Walker Little selection. We like the Andre Sisco selection. So kind of an up and down draft, and that's where you get to a B+.
What was your opinion of how Travis Etienne is going to get used in Urban Meyer's offense? I know, the running back pick, it's always going to be, oh man, overdrafting a running back. I think he was the 66th ranked player on PFF's draft board, but you think that he can actually be used well in this offense?
Yeah, so Urban Meyer, the day after he gets picked, classic coach says he's going to be the third down back.
Carlos Hyde.
They're going to split the carries. No, you draft him in the first round. He's going to get the bulk of the touches there. I don't believe that whatsoever. It's more just promoting competition there. Etienne, I think, the receiving ability that you saw develop throughout his time at Clemson, where he was getting lampooned early in his career, sophomore year, getting laughed at in practice for how bad his hands were, how little he was utilized in the passing game, made a concerted effort to improve that part of his game, led the FBS, all running backs in receiving yards this past year, had some vertical routes on his tape that I think you're going to see in this Jacksonville Jaguars offense. Like, I think he, in my opinion, is going to get utilized more valuable manner than Najee Harris, even though Najee's probably going to get more touches in that Pittsburgh Steelers offense, but they're going to be between the tackles carries, not where we say running backs are providing value. I think Etienne, that home run hitting ability, can actually bring something to the table they do not have there in Jacksonville.
A lot of elements to the Jaguars draft that are similar to last year. Remember we said they got 2 first-rounders that were kind of boom or bust, right? I mean, they're second-rounders with Tyson Campbell. He's got the potential, right? He was a great true freshman. Size, straight line speed. Walker Little, who you love, who is a project at tackle, and then Andre Sisco, the third rounder, who's maybe a good coverage safety, but again, boomer bust type of prospects for the Jags.
Can you expand a little bit more on the Tyson Campbell pick? I know you have him as the 108th ranked player on PFF's draft board, but from a consensus perspective, I think he was in the top 50 on the athletic consensus board. Why are you lower on Tyson Campbell?
Well, I think, even from that perspective, he's around 50 is probably where you saw him the most. He gets picked 33rd on the board. There was a lot of talented players coming off there at the top of round 2. Like Elijah Moore was a top 25 player, goes just after him. Trayvon Merrick, a position they needed at safety, goes a few picks later. Like, there were some guys there that I thought could be immediate impact players for them. Campbell doesn't necessarily fit because he's an outside cornerback. Outside cornerback at Georgia, a press man type of corner, and they got 2 of those guys already. You got C.J. Henderson. You got Shaquille Griffin, who they signed this offseason. So curious the fit there. Not that we're ever going to be so down on drafting cornerbacks, but there are a lot better cornerbacks if you were going to have a guy play the slot for your defense. And the thing about Campbell, why he's so low on our board, is sort of change of direction ability, a bit suspect, and then only 10 career picks plus pass breakups in 2.5 seasons there at Georgia. The ball production just really not there from him.
Sam, set expectations for Jacksonville right now, because right now they have Trevor Lawrence. Mike said it yesterday, the best pick of the 2021 NFL draft. I think his prop right now is 4,150 passing yards. Receiving yards, that'd be great. Passing yards. Do you think he clears that number in a 17-game season? How quickly do we see a top 10, top 5 quarterback in the NFL like everyone is expecting from Trevor Lawrence?
Yeah, I don't know if we can expect that immediately, but I certainly think that passing yardage total is attainable. I mean, Justin Herbert last season passed for 4,300 yards or something in a 16-game schedule, and he didn't play the 16-game schedule. Remember, Tyrod Taylor started the season. Yeah. So it's certainly possible for him. Now, Justin Herbert also set the rookie touchdown record. That was a fairly impressive record-setting kind of rookie year. So, look, Trevor Lawrence is supposedly a generational Andrew Luck, Peyton Manning, difference-making type of quarterback. And I think it's easier to hit the NFL running now than it was when Peyton Manning came into the league back in 1998. But the Jags are still not a great team. There's still issues around him. He's probably going to have some kind of growing pains. So I doubt he's going to look like a top 10, top 5 quarterback right out of the gate. But he can probably be pretty good and an immediate, obvious difference to what they've had in the past few years.
All right, let's jump now to the Houston Texans. I think one more thing on the Jags. The interesting thing is, Andrew Luck, he get compared to Andrew Luck a ton, like the best prospect since Andrew Luck. You said it all the time. He did not really hit his stride until, 2-3 years in the NFL. I think we could see that potentially with Trevor Lawrence. Lower some expectations.
I got confused for a second. I didn't know if you were talking about Trevor Lawrence or Davis Mills as we move to the Texans here.
All right, Texans here. You gave them a grade of a C-, Mike, a C-. I think other people, you see other draft grades. I saw an F- out there. Someone gave this grade. Someone gave this draft class an F-, taking quarterback Davis Mills, former 5-star out of Stanford, with their first pick of the 2021 NFL Draft at 67, grabbing an athletic prospect in wide receiver Nico Collins out of Michigan. Brevin Jordan, another interesting pick there coming out of Miami, Florida, a little bit on the lighter side for the tight end position. Your thoughts on this draft, Mike?
Hate it. It was the lowest draft grade we gave out. And one, because they didn't have a ton of draft capital. And when you don't have a ton of draft capital, you don't make the trade they made for Nico Collins. Mm-hmm. You don't give up one of the lowest EV, expected value trades in this draft to get one guy. You have holes every single positional group on your roster at this point, and one guy is not making a difference. And then I think that Davis Mills pick just completely...
Say it. You said it yesterday.
It just lighted on fire. They lit that pick on fire. It completely just misses where you are as a roster. A misinterpretation of how good you are as a team, because you are the worst roster in the NFL. And that is almost even with Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson ain't playing for you this fall either. So without Deshaun Watson, you are by far the worst team in the NFL. If you don't have the number 1 overall pick, that's going to be a surprise. If you don't have a top 3 pick, I would be floored. I'd quit my job. They're going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. That just is what it's going to be. And so you're going to get a quarterback next year no matter what. Even if Davis Mills plays okay, you'd be crazy to then pass on next year's quarterback class. So
the Houston Texans have 1 first-round draft pick since they drafted Deshaun Watson in 2017, and it's Titus Howard. This is just one of the most mismanaged franchises that we've seen in a long time. Yeah. And they had the deck stacked against them in this draft and then didn't do anything to sort of pull, every single pick they had was below where our big board was.
It felt like the draft equivalent of the free agency they had, right? Which is they just attacked the bottom 20 positions on the roster. Now, to be fair to them, they're not in a position to do much else given what they have in terms of draft capital. But so far, Houston under Nick Caserio appear to have been, let's attack the depth, right? The whole roster is bad. Let's attack the bottom 20 guys in this roster. Let's get better there. But at some point, you need to address the top 22, the guys that are actually going to be starting and playing on Sunday if you're going to get any better. You had one of the top 5 graded quarterbacks in the NFL last year, and you were bad. That guy might not be there anymore, and you might be even worse.
I think Eric's point's the big one, though, right? How did they get here? What could the Texans have actually done better, right? So we always talk about when you trade up for a quarterback. They did that 4 years ago. They traded up for Deshaun Watson. They made the move. After you do that, the way to build around that young quarterback is to trade back and accumulate more draft capital, draft assets, and you build that roster. That roster has gotten depleted since they drafted Deshaun Watson, and every trade that they made just didn't get return, as far as draft capital goes. Mm-hmm. So, Nick Caserio in his first draft was hamstrung a little bit, and instead of trading up, it should have been man, we need talent on this roster. Every time I can, I'm going to try to trade back, take more shots at it, because the foundation of this roster is just in a rough spot.
And I would add to that, too. It's more than just trading back. I think it's trading back, allocating that draft capital, and hitting on valuable positions. Go pick highly paid positions, like offensive tackle, wide receiver.
I disagree with that, because you're so late in the draft that it's the valuable positions aren't going to be
not this year's draft. Okay, after you get Deshaun Watson, you trade back, allocate more draft capital, or get more draft capital, like Steve said, and then as you build up this team, add valuable positions and hit on those positions. Not in this year's draft. This year's draft, there wasn't a lot they could do. 22, and they still managed
if
to
you
have
take
the
a valuable position in this draft, those guys already stink, right?
Exactly.
Quarterback in the round 3 stinks.
Yeah, no,
wide
that's
receiver in
That's why I
round
say don't draft them at that point.
Yeah.
Draft guys who will see your field.
Draft guys that will start. I think one of the interesting thought exercises, we won't do it here, maybe in another video, like who are the starting 22 for this Houston Texans team? There are a lot of different players.
I'd rather not.
Yeah, I know. I'm just kidding. We're not. Let's move to the Indianapolis Colts here. The Indianapolis Colts on PFF.com, their draft grade right now a C+. The Indianapolis Colts taking Kwity Paye, a PFF favorite, guy that ran a sub 6.5 3-cone coming out of Michigan. One of my favorite prospects in this class. Also a crazy story there. And also after that, though, not a lot of players that were high on PFF's draft board. Some reaches for sure. C+ grade, one of the lower grades we handed out. Your thoughts there, Mike?
Yeah, just a curious draft. They've invested so much in the edge. Like I think 4 day 2 guys in the last 3 drafts at the edge rusher. Now they obviously address it with a little more draft capital. Pick 21, like we say, if you're going to draft a defensive end, do it in the first round. The guys that hit, they go early. The NFL, like there is a type that succeeds there, and the NFL knows it. Everyone knows it. And so Kwity Paye, I feel good about that pick. But then after that, doubling up there, Dayo Odeyingbo, torn Achilles, not really going to make an impact, you would think, for your roster year 1. And so, yes, Chris Ballard knows it's not a one-year decision. It is a long-term decision. That's how he approaches the draft. I respect that. And he has been one of the best decision makers in the draft over the course of his GM tenure. But this one, it's just not going to help you right now. And when you make that move for Carson Wentz, the move for DeForest Buckner, you're kind of trying to win right now.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of just in opposition to where else they've gone this offseason.
If you've been tuning in to the last 20 hours of coverage, I've been pretty critical of where the Colts are going. I never say go into a draft and fill your needs, but I thought the Colts could fill their most important needs, which are left tackle and wide receiver. They could have done it in those first couple rounds. I like the Kwity Paye pick as well. I just still have concerns. So to me, this is TBD. You know, what are they going to do after the draft? You know, team building doesn't end with the draft. There are free agents out there. There are trade opportunities. But again, I don't see the Colts winning anything with this receiving core, and they still have work to do at left tackle. And, you know, I don't think Sam Tebby is the guy, Sam.
It's a fascinating thing because you say, look, you don't want to go into the draft with a desperate need that you have to fill in the first couple of rounds. But if you're going to do that, if you've put yourself in that position, it might be even worse to then not address that need, which is basically what the Colts have done. They went in there needing to find a left tackle because Carson Wentz is now your quarterback, and that guy collapses in the face of pressure. So you need to find a left tackle that can secure his blind side. And as you said, Steve, Sam Tebby is not it, right? Now, maybe Russell Okung or Villanueva is that guy, but you haven't made that move yet. And they elected instead to address edge rusher and didn't come back for that tackle. So there's still, there is that open space at left tackle.
I do wonder if they themselves are a little bit disappointed in 54, how the board fell. They're sitting there, a couple nice tackles, Sam Cosmi, Dylan Radin still on the board. They come off with 2 of the 3 picks prior to them, then kind of holding, dick in their head.
Kwity Paye, the 24th ranked player on PFF's draft board, went off at 21. Then Dayo Odeyingbo, the Vanderbilt edge, was the 80th ranked player on PFF's draft board. The only above average grade we gave to their selection was Kwity Paye. Everything else after that was either below average or average. And despite all of that, and we'll get to who we think is going to be the division winner later, they're the favorite to win this division. The Indianapolis Colts are the favorite to win the AFC South. All right, let's go ahead and now jump to the Tennessee Titans. We loved this draft. They got a couple of our guys here, a couple of PFF's favorites. Caleb Farley at 22, the former Virginia Tech cornerback that likely slid due to some back injury stuff that came up. I think 2 back surgeries in the last year, maybe last 18 months. And then they had Dylan Radins, the North Dakota State offensive tackle, one of the higher ranked players on PFF's draft board. You look a little bit further, Elijah Molden, Washington slot cornerback, a top 40 player on PFF's draft board. One of my favorites, honestly, Mike, and I hope you talk about him more, Rashad Weaver, Pittsburgh edge that I think can come in week 1 and legit start for this football team.
Yeah, and obviously a draft's make or break on those day 1, day 2 picks. But that day 3 pick there, Rashad Weaver, fairly NFL ready from a production standpoint, 3rd highest graded edge defender in the Power 5 this past season. From a size standpoint, 6'4", 259 with almost 34-inch arms. And he uses his hands really well. I think he can come in and be kind of a base end for you right out the gate. That's rare to find on day 3. But then we loved all those day 1, day 2 picks. Farley, we get why he fell to where he did. Some teams probably didn't have him on their board altogether with those back surgeries. That's going to be, it's kind of just a ticking time bomb. Like that, there's probably going to be issues with it at some point. You just hope it's not, the next few years when you have him on this rookie deal. So We love the Raidens pick. That was a 32nd overall player on our draft board. Like I just said, I think that was the guy that, if he was there for the Colts at the next pick, they probably were going to turn the card in with his name. Excelled at the Senior Bowl during his week of practice there. And then obviously Elijah Molden, 35th overall player, Steve's guy. You want to talk a little bit more about your boy, Steve?
I love Elijah Molden. I mean, he is a guy, I love versatility, and we love coverage players. He could play over the slot. He could play a little bit of safety. It was a need for the Titans. Remember the Titans made the playoffs year after year, kind of a 9-17, but they were solid in the secondary with Malcolm Butler, Adoree Jackson, Logan Ryan back there. They needed to replenish in the secondary. So I think Molden is a contributor. We talked about Ray Dunns as a contributor. That fills a need at tackle. If Caleb Farley hits, it's awesome. So they came in with major needs. They hit them with quality players. My big concern still at wide receiver with the Titans. Don't forget, Ryan Tannehill comes in, plays elite football over the last 2 years. They coincided with A.J. Brown coming in, and they've had Corey Davis. They do not have a second wide receiver.
Yes.
It is not Derrick Henry's team. It's Ryan Tannehill's team.
Very true.
And if they cannot throw the ball down the field, they're in trouble. So they got to figure something out at receiver between now and the start of the season.
Aren't we like a little bit worried here about Tennessee this year as well, having the same issues that like a team like Minnesota had, where we love their draft, but it's still a pandemic offseason, and the probability that all these players come in on a depleted team and contribute in year one is pretty slim, right? When we think about this division, Tennessee, the reigning champions, lose a bunch of players. We love the draft, but does that have a lag time of a year or two?
Yeah, I would say it does with these players they drafted for sure.
All right, so that goes back to free agency, right? I mean, the reason why we can compliment the Browns right now is because they filled all of their holes in free agency. Every need was fine, so they could come into the draft and just draft the best players. The teams that didn't do that have put themselves in just a precarious position going into the season.
I mean, you said it before the draft. You say it all the time. You go into free agency to fill holes, you fill needs in free agency, and then when you get to the draft, go attack value. And that's exactly what the Cleveland Browns did. I think they were one of the few A-plus grades that we did have. Let's get to the whiteboards. We're going to pick our division winner in the AFC South here. Remember, right now, according to most sports books, they have the Indianapolis Colts as a plus 100 favorite, Tennessee Titans at plus 125, and then the Jacksonville Jaguars, Houston Texans, we won't mention that number. The Jacksonville Jaguars are at plus 750 to win this division.
God, my handwriting is...
I'm going crazy. Team Trevor. Go Jags.
I went Jags, man. I'm all in on the Jags, too.
Go Jags.
I went Jags.
Okay, so Jags got the best.
Yeah.
Jags had the easiest decisions. They had four. They
got the best player in the draft.
They got four top 50
I wasn't
picks
saying
and
that
one overall.
We're not picking who had the best draft. We're picking who wins the division.
Oh, wins the division.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was wins the division.
Still, I'll say
It's all right. It's on camera now. It's locked in.
I do think the Titans win the division.
I think the Jags are the best value. For sure here. There's no reason the Colts should be even money to win this division.
I agree. That's the most egregious number.
What has Carson Wentz done to deserve that over the past few seasons?
Yeah.
You bring this up all the time. Give me the other side of that number. I'd like to bet that line.
Just
how do we short the Colts?
Well, in this division, you actually have an easy bet because you don't have to pick Houston. They're not winning the division. So you can just go Dutch on the other two, Jacksonville and Tennessee, as a betting against Indianapolis here.
All about going Dutch here. We're going to bring in another PFF talent after the break. We're going to talk to Bruce Gradkowski, former Oakland Raiders, Cincinnati Bengals quarterback, also a quarterback analyst here with PFF when we get back after the break. Bruce is live. Oh, wow. We're getting ready for Bruce then. Let's go ahead and get Bruce going. Bruce Gradkowski coming on, former quarterback in the NFL. Excited to have him on. Bruce, how you doing? There he is.
What's up, brother?
Living the dream, man. Where are you at? Up in Toledo?
You guys here? Living the dream here in Toledo, Ohio. Dealing with communion this weekend, wedding showers. Do people not understand that? Does my wife not understand the draft was all weekend? So just trying to figure that out.
When I was talking to you yesterday, you had a unicorn t-shirt on playing Dad of the Year on day 2 or day 3 of the draft. I mean, come on, man. You're just laying it out for the family here.
Unicorn dad, brother. That's what I do. My daughter's 8, Roman's 5, Lincoln's 3. We got communions, baseball games. So just staying busy. How you doing?
Doing great, man. We've been up here for 20 hours doing draft coverage. I mean, where I'd like to start with you is which quarterback of the quarterbacks drafted in the 2021 NFL Draft do you feel like is in the best situation to succeed in 2021?
Wow. I mean, loaded question, because I really feel like how the first round shook down, that I'm happy for each quarterback because they each went to a situation that was best for them. Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson, they have to get ready to go now. I mean, they're going to be the face of that team, the organization. They need to help those franchises ASAP. So a lot on their shoulders, you know, with Justin Fields, Mac Jones, Trey Lance. Now those guys can go to the organization, learn. They all have someone in front of them. They're not going to get thrusted into the action. So this gives them time to almost just do what they do. And there's not going to be high expectations on them. So they can very well just impress and get thrusted into the action when they're ready. You know, or, you know, if Andy Dalton's struggling in Chicago and now Justin Fields comes in, and I think there's pressure off of him. So I think with each quarterback, like I look at Trevor Lawrence to start with, and I think him in that offense with Darrell Bevell, I love what Bevell did in Detroit with Matthew Stafford, the play-action pass game. So I feel like where Lawrence struggled in college, he tried doing too much, and I think Bevell will help with that because that play-action pass game, easy, pure progressions, good, reliable checkdowns. So I think he'll be coached the right way will help him bottle all that up.
Bruce, there's more than just Austin here. It's the whole team, man. And I need to know this decision at number 3 with the 49ers. Your buddies over there in San Francisco. Did they make the right move with Trey Lance over Justin Fields or Mac Jones?
Well, you know, you guys are doing a great job all weekend, man. I watched the crew, man. I'm cheering you guys on. And good for you guys going strong. So I'm sure you're just kind of running on fumes right now, but so much information you guys are throwing out. I love it. You know, with the Niners, I was so excited for this draft because I couldn't wait to see what they were going to do. And I know George was fired up. I'm surprised he didn't rip off his shirt when the pick was called. And I'm sure he's just happy it wasn't Mac Jones. But as the draft got closer, I really was trying to put myself in the Niners situation, and I think it came down to me. It was a few weeks ago that I said I think it's between Trey Lance and Mac Jones, and I kind of kept talking myself more and more into Trey Lance because of the upside, right? High risk, high reward. Now, do we agree? Because look, he's very green. He does not have a lot of playing time, but I think with Kyle Shanahan and that offense, and also Jimmy G still being there. I mean, this gives Trey Lance a good solid year or two, who knows, to kind of develop because that's what he needs. He needs to develop. But I look at Trey Lance's game and him operating under center, him getting through progressions. I mean, that's something you saw on tape a lot. And that's one thing I trust, that maybe his game does transition pretty well to the NFL, especially with good coaching with the Niners. And look, we can look at value and argue all that, but at the end of the day, too, I just look at these teams, right? And if you just don't want to pass up on your guy or have a chance that someone else can take him, you give up what you need to get him, you know? And I know we have arguments about taking, you know, running backs in the first round and how high was Mac Jones going to go? Was that too high to take him at 3? And Trey Lance with the inexperience. So a lot into it, but I think, you know, Kyle Shanahan was sold on this guy for a while. And he was kind of keeping us all on the edge of our seat. I think Trey Lance can succeed there, but I do have some concerns because he hasn't played a bunch. I do worry about his accuracy, but I think with him playing under center and getting through progressions, he could do what they need. And then he brings the upside with his athleticism. So I think there's a lot to like, but I do have concerns there, but we'll see how it goes, and he's in a great situation, though.
Bruce, I want to ask you, of the quarterbacks not drafted in the first round, guys that came up a little bit later, Kellen Mond to the Minnesota Vikings, Kyle Trask to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and then Davis Mills, former Stanford quarterback, going to the Houston Texans. Of those 3 quarterbacks, who is your favorite?
Man, I would say right off the bat, I'd say Kellen Mond. There's something in me that is telling me he's going to go there and impress. Now, look, I worry about his accuracy, but I think he's had a ton of snaps, 1,500 some passing snaps in college. So he's got a lot of experience. I think you see it in the Senior Bowl. That was one thing, like throughout the week, yeah, he had some good throws and practice, but it was like game time. To me, he feels like he's just a game time baller. And I feel like that's going to resonate in that locker room. I do feel like he could maybe explode on the scene over there, but also he's not going to be rushed into action. I think Kirk Cousins is coming off one of his better seasons TD-wise and so forth. So I think he'll be able to learn and develop. I think that system will help him. But also that system depends on accuracy, and that's where I have some concerns. But, you know, I just think at the end of the day, not X's and O's, but what the guy might bring to the locker room, his athleticism in the huddle. I kind of like this Kellen Mond pick. The Davis Mills thing is interesting because he doesn't have a lot of snaps, but I really liked him out of Stanford. And then I think of Pep Hamilton, the pass game coordinator, quarterback coach with the Texans. You got to figure he's boys with David Shaw over there in Stanford. So he knows something. There's something that Shaw's like, look, this guy is a beast. You might want to take a flyer on him. And that's what the Texans did. Now, hey, there's a lot of other things they need to do over there. But I think there's something to like about Davis Mills. He's not super athletic or anything like that, but there was some Andrew Luck about him that I liked. And I'm interested to see how that plays out. Now, then Kyle Trask, I mean, going to Tampa, getting to learn behind the GOAT. He's not going to be thrusted into action. He's a big, strong guy. I would think his arm would be stronger for how big he is. But I don't mind the pick, and kind of maybe he can just emulate what Brady does in a sense. But I think out of all those guys, I'm really interested to see how that plays out in Minnesota. I mean, I think it's no doubt Cousins is the guy, but I think Kellen Mond brings some interesting things to that offense.
Bruce, always a pleasure when our paths cross. Really appreciate you jumping in here. I know you're trying to be the super dad this weekend. Until next time, my friend, thanks so much.
You guys are the best.
All righty, we're going to take a break now here, and then when we get back, we're going to look at the NFC North. More draft grades, more whiteboard, a lot of stuff to go on here on PFF's NFL Draft Recap Show when we get back.
Football is, in my opinion, the most complex sport. It's not even close.
Chris Collinsworth has more.
I'm Chris Collinsworth. I work for NBC Sports. I am a broadcaster.
For the football.
Aaron Rodgers. Everything in business is speed related. Somebody's going to get there with machine learning, with AI. We want to be the first ones.
PFF analyzes football in more detail than anybody else on the planet.
And that is some
best NFL rivalries, Bears-Packers.
Bears-Packers.
Packers-Bears.
Rodgers played some of the best football we've ever seen.
You don't want to see that pass rush. There's always a real buzz at the start of football season. And for us, that excitement is part because we really improved our systems. We're embracing machine learning. We're embracing AI. We present information that we've gathered to the teams, to the people that are playing fantasy football, to the fans, and we put perspective on the game of football. So let's take a play, for example. Aaron Rodgers throws a perfect pass down the field, which clangs off the receiver's hands, and it bounces to a defensive back trailing behind.
And it's intercepted.
The box score will tell you that Aaron Rodgers threw an interception, a huge negative. PFF, on the other hand, is going to give Aaron Rodgers a great grade. So what we're trying to do is evaluate not necessarily the result or the stat of the play, but what really happened.
And positive that ball location. That's incredible.
The data is so much bigger than what my team can do with it. Our plan was, let's partner with somebody that can help us with the data.
The most important thing for us was to build a system that was seamless. So we moved our whole infrastructure into the AWS cloud.
So the math is crazy, but it's predictive, right?
Machine learning allows us to get very, very quickly to very complex data. And the AI allows us to see the connections within the data that the human beings can't.
AWS is allowing us to go through the machine learning phase together, and we can now predict future performance based on the data of the past.
Things like our passing grade will generally correlate to passing grade.
I'm going to stack the line of scrimmage. I'm going to force him to have to throw the ball.
If you are addicted to the game, which I think I am, I think I'm addicted to the game, the passion of the study itself becomes really significant. But we have the data, we have the analysis, and now we have AWS and the computing power and skills of that team. We're going to truly change the game.
Welcome back to PFF's NFL Draft Recap Show. We are on to the NFC North. We're going to be doing draft grades for every single team, all 32 teams, and then picking division winners as we go. We're on to the NFC North, and we're starting with the Detroit Lions. I really like this draft, Mike. I was a big fan of the Penei Sewell pick. I also love Ali McNeil out of NC State. And then Ifeatu Melifonwu at 101. Like, a lot of these picks I came away with really happy with what the Detroit Lions did.
Yeah, Sewell falling into the lap there. That's a sprint in the card with how good he is as a prospect. Number 4 overall player on the PFF draft board. And then the Ali McNeil pick. We're going to love that one. He's our second DT. They had one of the weakest DT groups in the NFL. They obviously address it in the second with Levi Muzirika out of Washington. A 3 technique, kind of a swing for the fences here with how athletic and explosive that dude is. And then McNeil, another guy who's explosive off the nose, the highest run defense grade of any player in the country this past season. And the Ifeatu Melifonwu pick is interesting. He's kind of a unique corner in that not a lot of guys have his wingspan, have his explosiveness, have his size. A lot to work with. You're going to have to develop him, though. He's going to have to get a little bit more physical there on the outside.
One thing I liked about this draft is like a lot of the players ended up being like plus athletes, right? The corner, the defensive tackle. When you look at this, what I also like about this is also they didn't waste draft picks on dumb positions, right? You're not seeing linebacker, you're not seeing running back until round 7, but at the same time, you're also not. Like they're not trying to build the house without the foundation either, because they're not. We're going to talk about who was going to win this division. They're not winning this division this year, no matter what. But they do have a good foundation for the future once they get the quarterback in place. Post Goff. I think.
So I think it makes sense from Dan Campbell's sort of that opening press conference about wanting to eat kneecaps or whatever. But like a tone setter, the guys they drafted are very physical players. Yep. That is what they're doing, like physical specimens of players. They did it a smart way. Instead of the last regime, Bob Quinn, they wanted to establish the run, and so they drafted running backs, 2 linebackers. They drafted the wrong guys to play that brand of football. If you're going to play that brand of football, these are the kind of guys you draft.
Exactly. You take offensive linemen, defensive linemen, the guys that can be valuable one day, as opposed to sort of like doing what the Steelers do, take a running back, right? Yeah. That when you see the running game needs fixed, you take the last part of that, or if you need to stop the run, you take the last part of that, which is a linebacker. And instead, Detroit started with the foundation.
We've seen other teams do this in recent years too. The Panthers' new regime, their first pick was Derek Brown. Got to win in the trenches, interior defensive lineman. The Dolphins did the same thing with Christian Wilkins a couple years ago. I think the Lions couldn't go wrong. I mean, other than what Eric said, if they're as long as they're taking good players at decent positions, can't really screw this draft up because the Lions have so many needs and they're just starting over with that roster.
Tone setter for sure, Levi Muzirika. When I interviewed him, he dropped more F-bombs than I did, and I usually swear a decent amount, which was interesting. He said he likes to F people up. Let's jump to now the Chicago Bears, one of my favorite draft classes in 2021. A big reason for that, obviously, they make arguably the steal of the draft, one of the best picks of the 2021 NFL draft, get really aggressive and trade up for former Ohio State quarterback Justin Fields. Then they make another trade up on day 2 and go get Tevin Jenkins, the big mauler. Talk about a tone setter. Tevin Jenkins out of Oklahoma State, an absolute mauler. They trade up and get him at 39. That's what you're grading here. You're grading those 2 picks, Justin Fields and Tevin Jenkins. Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy getting uber aggressive.
Yeah.
And making sure they get 2 highly impactful players. This is an A+ draft, according to you.
Yeah, the only sort of long-term worry is the aggression. Now where do you build the rest of this roster? Because it's still a flawed roster, and it's still an aging roster with how much they're investing in older players on that team. But it gets a lot easier when you have the quarterback in place. If Justin Fields becomes what we think he can, with the number 3 overall player on the board, they could have traded the entire draft for him. It wouldn't have mattered if he's that good. And then the Tevin Jenkins pick also, love that one. Like 2 back-to-back players where if we're in charge of the Bears draft board, these are who we would pick.
You make a good point, Mike, because winning in the NFL, you can often just reverse the last 3 years and say, okay, how did teams draft? And we always talk about to have a good draft, you often have to do it in volume. It's not necessarily about hit rate. It's just drafting a lot, taking a lot of chances, and seeing what sticks. And the Bears are a couple years removed from giving up a ton of draft capital for Khalil Mack. They don't have the deepest roster in the NFL. So learn from the Texans here. You trade up for a quarterback, great. That's the time to do it. The next 3 drafts now, trading back, loading up, and building that roster around Justin Fields.
Also, let's just take a moment, and one of the winners of the draft weekend, Allen Robinson, for maybe the first time in this dude's football life, has a quarterback that can actually get him the ball. That guy has not had plus play at the quarterback position dating back to at least high school and maybe even beyond. The NFL, college with Christian Hackenberg. He finally has a quarterback that's accurate, can put the ball downfield. Allen Robinson's stock could go through the freaking roof this year.
Although he's only on the franchise tag. So by the time that's over, he's probably going to get traded to the Texans or something.
Stop. All right, another thing I wanted to add here quickly with Mike before we jump to the Minnesota Vikings. Khalil Herbert, a top 100 player on PFF's draft board, and Thomas Graham, another top 100 player. Yeah. They add them in the 200s, man. They're adding them in round 6. Khalil Herbert, the running back out of Virginia Tech, and then Thomas Graham, Oregon cornerback. Your thoughts on those picks?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, top 100 players on their board. I even like Kyrus Tonga, the shot in the 7th round. Like they attacked the 6th and 7th round with a lot of guys we liked. Herbert, 4.5 speed. I don't think, limited sample size is kind of why he gets here. Only 155 carries this past season, but rushing grades over 90 this year and a rushing grade over 90 back in 2019 when he played at Kansas. Yes, it was only on 44 carries, but I don't think it's a fluke that he broke out later in his career. I think he's the real deal. To get him in the 6th round, I think he could spell David Montgomery very well. You go to PFF.com and check out our draft tracker, an elite grade for Khalil Herbert, an elite grade for Thomas Graham, and an above-average grade for Kyrus Tonga coming out of BYU. Let's jump now to the Minnesota Vikings, a B-plus grade. I think this could have been higher, man, because I really do love Christian Darrisaw, the pick they made there to trade back from 14 to 23 and pick up PFF's offensive tackle 3, a top 20 player on PFF's draft board, Christian Darrisaw at 23. And the Kellen Mond pick is also good at 66. That's good value. Huge fan of that pick as well. I'm a big fan of Kenny Nwangu, the running back out of Iowa State. I really like a lot of the picks that they made. Yeah, B+ is solid.
Yeah, B+ is good.
That's higher than my GPA in college, so I'll take it for them. But yeah, the Darrisaw pick, that's the one you love here because that was the massive need. That was what they had to do. Fill left tackle. You had no options. You were going to flip Ezra Cleveland out there after a nice rookie year. They had at guard, switching positions. It could have gotten ugly. To me, Darrisaw could step in right away and provide you quality play. And like that offensive line all of a sudden looking a lot better, especially after a 3rd-round pick. Wyatt Davis, he falls for injury concerns. Yeah. But if he's healthy, number 1 guard on the board.
Yeah, I think that pick, it won't make as big an impact as Darrisaw, but it's a huge potential boost as well because they had the worst guard situation in the NFL last season. And Ezra Cleveland will stay at guard and compete for 1 spot, but Davis has a chance to come in and start if he can be a plus player as well. And suddenly the entire offensive line is getting revamped in pretty quick order.
Do we think they did enough with the defense, though? You look at Chaz Surratt, he's not going to play right away where they have Barr and Kendricks. And you look, they've never taken a defensive lineman in the Zimmer regime in round 2 or earlier, and they always think that they can sort of scheme up these guys. And with the exception of Donnell Hunter, they've never been able to, right? Last season, for one of the worst pass rushers in football, they do get Hunter back. Reports that he's unhappy, though. And still, like, Hunter's almost always had Everson Griffin on the other side. If he's a one-person, show over there, like, I don't think that they necessarily get the pass rush they need. And in the secondary, Jeff Gladney last year, 1st-round pick, probably not going to play either. Dantzler did show some promise, but this defense was one of the league's worst last year, and I don't think they get much better as a result of this draft.
Yeah, I think they're hoping for a development from some of the young guys. Obviously, probably not Gladney, but Dantzler showed really well down the stretch, and I think had the ability to be a top-tier corner. And up front, you do only have Donnell Hunter on the edge, but you now have 2 new interior players that they're going to expect to make some kind of impact. Michael Pierce coming back from the opt-out, and Dalvin Tomlinson in free agency. Like, they're at least going to be expecting the defensive line to not be the liability it was last year.
I just want to highlight, we talk about trading down all the time. This is the real life example. Here's what happened, right? If the Vikings had picked at 14 Christian Darrisaw, we would have said, check mark, good draft. They traded down in the 1st round. They picked up picks 66 and 86. They still picked Christian Darrisaw. They also picked the left guard, Wyatt Davis.
Yes.
So they got 2 offensive linemen for the price of 1, plus a shot at Kellen Mond. That's what happened in that trade down, and they gave up a 4th rounder as well. But essentially getting 2 offensive linemen for the price of 1, that is a massive win for the Vikings, who needed the offensive line help, and they're not going anywhere unless those 2 picks hit, and that's the best way to answer those questions.
That was a good recovery for them after swinging and missing on the Ngakoue trade, right? They didn't have a second because they panicked and went for Ngakoue in August last year. So they picked up those players as a result of needing sort of to fill out the draft, too.
Christian Darrisaw, the number 15 player on PFF's draft board, they grab him at 23. And with one of those picks, like you said, Wyatt Davis at 86. He was the 61st ranked player on PFF's draft board and the top guard in this class. All right, let's move now to the Green Bay Packers. Man, this was an interesting draft. I mean, there was a lot of guys here. There's a lot of guys when they were picking, and it's not always PFF's opinion. PFF's lower on these guys. Oh my gosh, they made a terrible draft. It's like also a lot of these guys, the consensus was lower on. Cornerback Eric Stokes was 45th, I believe, on the consensus board among analysts, and then Josh Myers, another guy that was a little bit lower on PFF's draft board. Their best pick, Mike, might have been Amari Rodgers, the Clemson slot receiver. I really do like that pick, but C-, the one tied, I think, for the lowest grade we gave out to a draft class this year.
Yeah, just the biggest consensus reach in the first round, one of the biggest consensus reaches in the second, or excuse me, not consensus, PFF board reaches.
Yeah.
In the first, biggest PFF board reaches in the second. Those are your most valuable picks. You turned it into a center who has pass protection issues. Never graded over 75.0 for a full season. That's in college. That's against college nose tackles who are notoriously not good at rushing the passer. So issues there in terms of if you're drafting a center in the second round, that guy better be coming in and starting right away for you. And they need him to start right away with Corey Linsley going. I'm not sure he's going to be able to in terms of holding up the NFL from day one. And then the Stokes pick, curious scheme fit from, like I said, during draft day, graded out far better in man coverage than he did in zone coverage. And they're obviously going to be a zone-heavy team coming over with Joe Barry's new scheme. And 72nd on our board because he just was very clunky, changing directions, did not have the feet and production in kind of off coverage that I would want.
Are we grading the draft or the weekend? Because if we're grading the weekend, this is not good.
Yeah,
for the
I guess
Packers.
it could be an F.
This is lower than the C- because the biggest news is obviously Aaron Rodgers might not be the quarterback. And that makes you even less excited about our lowest graded draft because it could be all of this supporting cast around Jordan Love rather than Aaron Rodgers. Bottom line is if Aaron Rodgers is back under center next year for the Packers, they'll be able to survive another subpar draft for the second year in a row. They'll still be good, but it's the second year in a row they essentially have our worst grade. And like I said, you reverse a couple years. This is going to hurt them next year, the year after, back-to-back drafts where they're just not getting the right value.
Are we going to talk about Jordan Love the way we talk about Sam Darnold, where this lags for 2 years and then he comes up as the starting quarterback, and the last two drafts are like his supporting cast, and they're all awful, and
All right,
it's not a great situation.
Let's get to the whiteboards, man. We don't know if Aaron Rodgers is going to be the starting quarterback of the Green Bay Packers. We don't love this draft. Right now, though, they are the favorite to win the division. At -121, they are the favorite to win the division. The other teams here are Minnesota Vikings at +250 to win this division, and then the Chicago Bears at +325. A quote from Matt LaFleur here is, I know the reports are out there, but this guy's our quarterback, man. I want nothing more than to see him back in a Packer uniform. A little coach speak there. Of course he wants him back, but still, the Green Bay Packers, that should be their top priority, getting Green Bay Packers. If they want to win this division, if they want to win the Super Bowl or compete for a Super Bowl, Aaron Rodgers needs to come back. Ultimately, guys, who do you think wins this division?
Getting crazy over here. Again, go Vikings. Oh, you did it too.
Oh, wow. The Bears?
We're all assuming Aaron Rodgers is not back.
Yes.
I assume. Okay.
Yeah.
The Bears have been 8 games over 500 the last 3 years with Mitch Trubisky. Now they have a person with a pulse at quarterback. They'll be fine.
The rookie pulse, however.
I mean, Kirk Cousins finally has an offensive line for the first time in Minnesota career.
All right, we are on to the AFC North, baby. You want to start with where do we want to go here? Do we want to go Bengals? Yeah, I think we should start with the Cincinnati Bengals, baby. Let's go with the Cincinnati Bengals. I really do like their draft a ton. Like, I think they did a lot. They were like kind of the conversation of the 2021 NFL draft after the quarterbacks. At pick number 5, do they go Penei Sewell? Do they go Jamar Chase? They ultimately pair up Joe Burrow with Jamar Chase, the former LSU wide receiver that did things in the SEC at 19 years old. I don't know when we'll see it again. Like what he did at that age against legit NFL caliber cornerbacks like Trayvon Diggs, A.J. Terrell, C.J. Henderson was rare. So rare that he didn't even play a down in 2020 and was still a top 5 pick. And then after that, after trading down, they pick up Cincinnati's own out of Clemson, Jackson Carman, a guy that could play tackle potentially, but will likely kick into guard for them. Joseph Asai was a pick we didn't talk about a ton coming out of Texas, but I think that's a good value at 69. Huge fan of their first 3 picks in this draft. Why just a B, though?
They didn't get great value. Is kind of why. I mean, just solid across the board. I don't think there was a team actually in the NFL that got closer draft position to the PFF draft board than the Cincinnati Bengals with their early picks. Jamar Chase, drafted at 5th overall. He was number 6 on PFF's board. Jackson Carman, 46th overall, 48th on PFF's draft board. Asai, 69th overall, 60th on PFF's draft board. That's like their 3 picks were basically where we said those guys should come off the board. So that's a B sort of draft. The Asai pick's the interesting one. We obviously didn't touch on that on the show, but he is a guy who is only his first year at edge was last year. He was an off-ball linebacker prior to that who would kind of come down on third downs and rush the passer. And for him to put up the grade he did, I believe, in the 80s this past year as a true junior, he's an ascending player. I think with Osai and Carmen, they drafted a couple of projects realizing that 2021 is probably not their year. That if those guys hit down the line, that they develop into what they could be, that you got two guys who were first-round type of talents but just never kind of quite got to that in the college sphere.
We should be giving the Bengals an A. I mean, if they were drafted, they had our draft guide open and they were just going by the book here.
Well, you got to
get
get value to get an A.
I know there were even better players on the board at times.
Exactly.
I mean, look, it all comes down to this. You know, it was Sewell and a receiver or Chase and a tackle.
Yeah.
You know, and I think they're going to watch Tevin Jenkins from Chicago and say, okay, we could have had him, could have had Tevin Jenkins, and we probably would have done that initially. They did trade down, got more picks, so it's Jamar Chase, the receiver, and Jackson Carman. The thing I like about Carman, you like him as a guard. That's a bigger immediate need for the Bengals. The Riley Reif 1-year contract works well now for 2021, and you hope Carman can eventually be the right tackle going forward. The whole draft comes down to those two players, but then I love the defensive line depth that they've added. So they've reshaped the defensive line. They've reshaped the receiving core because now they're 3 deep at receiver, and that is how you win in the NFL. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, a lot of good stuff in Cincinnati.
All right, let's go ahead and now jump to one of our favorite draft classes here in the AFC North, the Cleveland Browns, man. An A-plus draft. We don't give out a lot of A-pluses, but the Cleveland Browns, Andrew Berry there, doing work. Greg Newsome, one of Mike's favorite cornerbacks in the class, coming out of Northwestern at 26. And then a free fall. One of the biggest steals of the first 2 days, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, the linebacker out of Notre Dame, goes to them at 52. And after that, I like the James Hudson pick. Yeah. I like Tommy Togiai. Demetric Felton at 211 is not a bad shout. I'm a huge fan of the Cleveland Browns draft class, and obviously so are you with the A-plus grade.
Yeah, they got my favorite positional player pick of the first round, my favorite positional player, non-quarterback pick of the second round. Like, it's hard to lose after that. After what they got. Greg Newsome, 20th on the PFF draft board. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, 19th. And then the guy I do want to highlight is Tommy Togiai. I think this guy can be a difference maker on the interior. He has that level of athleticism, has that strength, 40 bench reps at his pro day. He is a monster, one of the best bull rushers in this draft class. You watch his tape. It's just such limited tape. Very surprised he came out as a true junior coming out, a former top recruit. This guy is an ascending player that really just, if he would have come back to school, he could have been like a second-round type of pick. But we just didn't get to see enough of him for teams to feel comfortable drafting him higher.
Smart-ass kid, too. When I talked to him, one of the more impressive interviews I had was Tommy Togiai. That
high
guy,
motor.
Yeah, he's a high motor, but also, brilliant, man. He was a really smart player. I think I'm excited to see him play more because, like you said, we have not seen him play a ton of snaps here. Sam, I'm going to come to you here with the Cleveland Browns. What does this draft mean necessarily for, and what are your opinions of the Cleveland Browns in year 2 of the Kevin Stefanski offense with Baker Mayfield? They added a lot defensively, Greg Newsome, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, but while we're on the Browns, this A-plus draft class, this is a huge year for Baker Mayfield. They picked up that 5th-year option. Does Baker Mayfield add to what we saw last year? Does he improve on what we saw, maintain? I'm interested to know what your thoughts there are.
I think he has a good shot to. I mean, this was the first year of that offense for everybody. And remember, we haven't really seen what it looks like with a fully healthy, fully integrated Odell Beckham Jr., who should still be one of the better wide receivers in the NFL in a system that can make good use of that kind of player. We haven't seen what that offense looks like when Odell Beckham is healthy and integrated into the offense. So I think this is a good draft for them to continue that trend. Even a guy like Anthony Schwartz out of Auburn, who they drafted in the 3rd round, not great value in terms of where we had him, but that guy has 4.2 speed, and that's something that they don't have in that wide receiver room. It's a skill set that was missing from that offense and something that could potentially make a big impact even if it's in a very limited role. So I think there are legitimate reasons to be really excited about Cleveland.
Pick-by-pick grades here. Greg Newsome, an elite grade, the 20th ranked player on PFF's draft board. An elite grade for Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, a top 20 player on PFF's draft board. And Tommy Togiai, top 100 player. You get him at 132. You just love to see that. Let's jump now to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Going to be one of our least favorite drafts here with a draft grade at a C, picking Najee Harris, the Alabama running back. I think PFF's top running back on the board. No. Number 2 running back behind Javonte Williams of UNC. They picked Najee Harris at 24. Never going to love the value of taking a running back in the first round, despite how awesome Najee Harris is. And then after that, Pat Freiermuth, Penn State tight end at 55. One of my favorite players in the draft, maybe keeping them from that C-. Kendrick Green, who fills a need at center there coming out of Illinois. Your thoughts on the Steelers draft?
Well, we'll see. If they can re-sign Alejandro Villanueva, this will look a lot different because it's for this year. Yeah. This draft is for this year. Straight up, this is what the Pittsburgh Steelers are doing. They're playing for 2021 because, as I said on the show, they have the least amount of contract commitments for 2022. All their guys are hitting free agency. It could get blown up after this. Ben Roethlisberger likely to retire. Like, they're going to need a QB. They're going to need a lot after this season. So Harris can make an impact this year. Freiermuth can make an impact this year at tight end. And then Kendrick Green can start at center. Those were the positions that they kind of needed to fill in that roster. Now, they still kind of needed cornerback. And there's some cornerbacks on the board. Greg Newsome was on the board, who would have been an excellent fit there for Pittsburgh Steelers, in my opinion. But you got 3 guys who, like I said, are going to slot in on a roster that didn't have a ton of needs to begin with.
And that's how we evaluate these things, too. You've done a good job saying, well, here are the other ways that they could have gone. It's not always about the players that you took. And our whole point with the running back thing is you don't have to get the best one.
Yep.
Sure, the best one. We can evaluate. We have a ranking of running backs.
Yeah.
There are different skill levels, but you don't have to get the best one to have the best production. And ultimately, that's all you want is run game production. The Steelers have question marks on the offensive line. Ali Villanueva is like the biggest wild card of this entire offseason. The Colts need him. The Steelers need him. The Ravens might need him. But just having a starting offensive tackle eases the burden of all these other picks. But if the Steelers don't get him back, they still have a massive question mark at left tackle. Yeah. And that's a bigger question mark than who's the starting running back. And if they did add Greg Newsome at corner, and they did add, an offensive lineman in the second round, the third round running back probably still would have improved their running game next year. So that's just the bottom line is when we look at the way draft capital is allocated.
Do we feel like Pat Freiermuth, we talked a lot about culture fits, Pat Freiermuth, Kendrick Green, Najee Harris, these guys are all like legit like blue chip culture guys entering the Pittsburgh Steelers front office.
Blue collar.
Front office, I guess. Yeah, blue collar. That's probably the better way to describe it here. Last one of the AFC North, we're going to jump to the Baltimore Ravens. Draft grade for the Baltimore Ravens, B+. They got 2 of my favorite first-round picks, though. Rashad Bateman, Minnesota wide receiver, perfect for what you want for Lamar Jackson. They didn't need a gadget speed type. They needed a guy that catches everything, can show up in contested catch situations, do a lot of those things on the outside. Rashad Bateman, the highest yards per route run from an outside alignment of any receiver in college football in 2019. Then after that, at 31, Odafe Oweh, formerly Jason Oweh of Penn State. Not formerly. His middle name's Jason. He's going by Odafe now. One of our favorite edge defenders in the 2021 NFL Draft. And then even after that, Ben Cleveland of Georgia, who's built in a lab. Shaun Wade, I think, is good value at 160. Tylan Wallace, contested catch guy that catches a lot of his passes. Big fan of this draft, B+.
Yeah, I think it's a solid all-around draft. The Brandon Stevens pick, I got to be honest, we didn't scout him. He had a 54.5 coverage grade last year at SMU. He is a pure traits projection, did not play well on the college football field at a small level, but the guy tested out very well at his pro day. But the Rashad Bateman pick, the Odafe Oweh, my bad. Sorry, Odafe.
It'll take a couple weeks to get used to.
I know,
That's true.
The Rashad Bateman Odafe Oweh picks, that's what we would have done. Those are fantastic picks.
Didn't your mock draft have?
My mock draft literally had those 2 in the exact spots. So
the thing with the Ravens is they always do a good job of getting the best out of defensive backs, right? So if they're going to take people like Wade, who I know has a lot of flaws, Brandon Stevens as well, who, like you said, has not played well in college. They've done a lot with, Jimmy Smith late end of the career, Brandon Carr late end of the career, very much effective players for them. So even though they probably were both overdrafted, I still think that they'll probably do fine in Baltimore. Tylan Wallace was somebody we were doing, college DFS. This guy got almost all of the air yards at Oklahoma State. He was their guy, and that meaningful at the college level.
The college DFS grind showing up on the draft recap show. The other thing I'll add here too, you brought up how much they develop on the back end with the secondary. I also think they developed edge talent very well. Matthew Judon, Darius Smith, and now
Tyus Bowser, legitimately drafted in the second round. 4 years later, they would prefer him at $6.5 million versus Judon and Ngakoue.
And now they got Odafe Oweh, who is like a legit project, 0 sacks. That's the number that everyone brings up out of Penn State. But if they develop him to the level that they have with others, I think this could be a great pick.
Well, it's 2 things. 1, they develop edge rushing talent really well. But 2, it's a phenomenal system for just generating pressure on a free basis if you're an edge rusher. The amount they blitz, the amount it's schemed up for those edge rushers to have really beneficial matchups or be completely unblocked, like those guys have just big boosts that most edge rushers don't have because they're in the right scheme.
If we're going to be, I've been critical of the Colts and some other teams for still having needs. I love the Ravens process. Orlando Brown, draft him in the 3rd round, get 3 years out of him, trade him for a first rounder. They had those 2 first rounders just now. However, they still don't have a right tackle for next year. Tyree Phillips is the guy that's technically slotted in right now. So Alejandro Villanueva would solve a lot of issues for the Ravens as well. It's just the one thing to keep an eye on. Love the business that they did this offseason, but it's still a hole right tackle.
Are you his agent? Have you got?
I just love a good mid-tier, average offensive tackle. They're so valuable in the NFL.
It's a good conversation, though, because we talk a lot about process and drafting for value. Don't force need in the draft, but at a certain point, when you're in this window and you got this glaring need, it's like eventually you do probably have to address it.
Baltimore is the easiest scheme to pass protect in the NFL. Though.
True, very true.
For an offensive tackle. You don't need elite tackle play there in that scheme. Edge rushers, even in the run game, guys just can't play you the same way they would, say, when you have a pocket
That's
pass.
one of the risks with trading for Orlando Brown, by the way, is that that's where you've seen him at the NFL level. Bad athlete, played really well in Baltimore. Question is, how much does that transfer?
We'll talk about the Chiefs in a minute.
Hey, ease up. All right, let's get to the whiteboards here. Who is going to win this division? If you look at sports books right now, the AFC North, the favorite to win the division is the Baltimore Ravens at plus 120, then the Cleveland Browns at plus 150. And I'll tell you guys right now, Pittsburgh Steelers fans, Steel City, they're not a dog in this race necessarily. Plus 400 to win this division. So it's a two-way race.
We've seen a 12-4 team division like defender Browns. As bad of odds the next year's Pittsburgh. No, probably.
I got Cleve here.
Oh, you use the database abbreviation.
Well, no, this is intentional. Closing line value. Right now, plus 150. Go chase them right now because they're going to be the favorite to win this division very soon. Right now, Baltimore at plus 120. Exciting stuff there. All right, now we're going to go ahead and jump to a quick break. Hear from some of our friends, close friends, so close that they're literally on us. Sweat Taylor, baby. That's a nice color on you, man. I like that army green.
It's not that great.
I like it. The gray, I like the gray a lot. That could be a uniform for the NFL podcast, honestly.
It's going to have to be later today.
It's going to have to be later today.
I just realized we're very symmetrical.
Are we symmetrical?
Get that wide shot again.
PFF NFL podcast.
We are.
Uniform over here.
To green, to black, to I don't know what that is.
Light gray, high
to
five.
Gray. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let's go ahead and hear from our guys at Sweat Taylor. There you have it, our friends at Sweat Taylor. Some of my favorite clothes over the past 3 days. No, I'll raise it again. My favorite clothes. Draft grade for Sweat Taylor, A+. Look in the lower third here. You have use promo code PFF Sweat, PFF-Sweat for 25% off your order on sweattailor.com. You want to look as good as Mike Renner? It starts with the clothes on his back, okay? You need to get Sweat Taylor. Go to sweattailor.com, 25% off, PFF-Sweat. Are we ready for the NFC East, fellas?
Let's do it.
We're a little bit ahead of schedule. We're moving quickly. Steve, can you talk a little bit more? Expand on your thoughts, buddy. I need a little more from you.
Do you want more Alejandro Villanueva discussion?
So if you bring up, can I say this?
You bring up 5 destinations.
If you bring up Villanueva again, I'm going to be a little upset.
Anyone else need a tackle? Russell Okung. Russell Okung's next.
Russell Okung's the only one you can bring up.
I'm not his agent. He's his own agent.
Fair enough. Let's jump to the NFC East. We're going to start with the New York Football Giants. And, they're coming up. I really like what Dave Gettleman did in this draft. There's a handful of times where he traded back. He traded back early in the draft after Devontae Smith went to the Philadelphia Eagles early, and then trades back down 220, grabs Kadarius Toney, the former Florida receiver that I know Sam is a big fan of. You talk a little bit about how much he improved over the course of this past season. Kadarius Toney, I think, was outside the top 30 on PFF's draft board, but they still get their wide receiver. Azeez Ojulari fell for some injury concerns that showed up late in the process, but man, one of the more productive edge defenders in all of college football last year. Aaron Robinson can start in the slot right away. The only reservation I have about Aaron Robinson is that he's going to take Darnay Holmes' spot. And I love Darnay Holmes coming out of UCLA. Darnay Holmes, their starting slot cornerback. Maybe Aaron Robinson steps ahead. But you have draft grade for the Giants, B+.
Yeah, they don't look now. They have one of the deepest secondaries in the NFL.
True.
They are loaded at safety, at corner. They got a lot of options. And that is exactly how we here at PFF say, build your secondary.
Despite having a first-round pick bomb out of it.
Yeah,
they didn't need it.
And that's what the Bucs did. That's what the Giants are doing. That's what the Browns are doing with John Johnson, Greg Newsome.
Aaron Robinson, easily the best scheme fit slot cornerback in this draft class, what he brings to the table. The press man he played there from the slot, which is rare to see as much as he did on his tape at UCF. And then Azeez Ojulari, obviously dropping for injury concerns. But again, it's another one. If he stays healthy, this dude is much better than the 50th overall player. The highest graded edge rusher in the country last season. Or the Power 5, last season, this 91.5 pass rusher grade. So those two picks, home runs, Kadarius Toney, we've mentioned it. The scheme fit there. Him and Jason Garrett's offense just seems like a square peg in a bit of a round hole at the moment. Kadarius Toney's going to have to develop as a route runner to be your number 2 there. So maybe right out the gate it might not be as sweet as it sounds. But Toney, super talented player.
What if they make Jason Garrett make good decisions, though? I mean, look, last year at this time we would have said Brian Schottenheimer, he'll never. I mean, in Seattle we would have said Brian Schottenheimer will never open up the offense for Russell Wilson. He was part of the key why Russell Wilson was on pace for 74 touchdowns at one point last year. You said they're deep in the secondary, but now they are as deep as it gets at receiver as well, with Darius Slayton, a deep threat, Kenny Golladay, a downfield threat, Tony working the underneath stuff with Sterling Shepard, who's still on the roster. John Ross is there too.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I didn't even think about John Ross.
Don't forget John Ross. He's one deep ball per game.
Dude,
That's all you need.
It's day 4. Can we get the dang video the Giants social media team had him do for the TikTok? It is absolutely sensational. Quinn, I know you're back there. I know you're a John Ross guy, too, from Cincinnati. There's a TikTok video of John Ross that the social media team makes him do. Very dissatisfied with doing it. It's a funny one, but keep going. Sorry.
Anytime you can get wide receiver 5 on TikTok, you got to do it.
You have to do it.
But they also have Kyle Rudolph, big tight end, your wide tight end, and Evan Ingram. So it's a lot of names, it's a lot of bodies. But again, that's how you do it. That's how you build that receiving core. So they're strong in the right areas for building around Daniel Jones, and a little sleeper in the NFC East, I think.
You look at their picks here on the PFF's draft tracker, which you can check out on pff.com/draft/tracker. We gave the Kadarius Toney pick above average, Azeez Ojulari elite, Aaron Robinson very good. Big fans of all of these. I mean, they got value on Azeez Ojulari, who's the 30th ranked player on PFF's draft board, picked at 50. Aaron Robinson, 56th ranked player, picked at 71. Big fan of those picks, man.
And then one thing we didn't even talk about. Dave Gettleman got the most trade value, most draft picks in 2021 of any team. 2022, excuse me, of any team. Future draft picks. Everyone's saying that the future draft picks are going to be more coveted because a ton of guys coming back to school. All these 6 years guys. More information on guys. You'll actually scout better next year.
Think about the 6 years.
They got more. They got the Bears 2022 first rounder, which actually could be a high pick because, if they're starting a quarterback, he may not be great.
This is why we were saying, this is what I'm saying about Jason Garrett, though, too. Like, a couple years ago, this never would have happened. But remember when Dave Gettleman hired the computer folks that he was joking about? The Giants are loaded in the front office with some smart minds. And I think they are doing a good job, and credit Dave Gettleman for listening to the people around him and getting more value. And he's drafted, since the Daniel Jones pick a couple years ago, say what you want about that, they've drafted extremely well.
Even if you look at his track record just in totality of his career, like he's never been bad. It's just that the things he does are often, there's always like one cartoon cliche Dave Gettleman move, which everyone hammers on him for like 5 years, right? Yeah. Like the Saquon Barkley pick at number 2. But if you look overall at what he does, he is a pretty good talent evaluator and has a pretty good track record everywhere he's been. It's just that there's always like one thing there to turn him into a caricature.
I mean, one thing about the Giants that's also low-key important here is their last draft had a ton of players, and a ton of players that might end up being okay after struggling last year. I mean, you have Andrew Thomas, Xavier McKinney, Matt Peart are all players that we liked and will, be heading into year 2 as well, in addition to all that athletes and skill position players they have for Daniel Jones.
Let's go ahead and jump now to the football team. The football team here in the NFC East. The division winners, as Steve likes to bring up a ton, the division winners of the NFC East last year, an A- draft grade for the football team. They grabbed Jamin Davis, a super athletic linebacker out of the University of Kentucky at 19. Samuel Cosme, Texas offensive tackle at 51, a guy that we really liked. Another really good athlete, Benjamin St-Juste, Minnesota cornerback, originally started at Michigan, then transferred to Minnesota, Canadian-born Benjamin St-Juste, who one of the best 3 cones of any player in this draft. Yami Brown, a player we liked. Really, really good picks here. They picked a long snapper, and we still gave this grade a A-. That was when you know it's a damn good draft.
Yeah, they had one of our favorite day 2s. They got a couple steals in Cosme, 38th on our board, De'Ami Brown, 45th on our board at valuable positions, at tackle and wide receiver respectively. And then Benjamin St-Juste, project corner to a degree, but like the project tools that he has are and like it already started to turn on. You already started to see him turn at the Senior Bowl where he had the highest grade in the one-on-ones there. Jamin Davis is swing for the fences. That one's a little bit. He may not come in and be a massive impact player for you right away, similar to like Kenneth Murray last year, where it's just like very athletic, all the tools, but raw. So that's more of a forward-thinking play, but like I said, that day 2, one of our favorites.
For perspective, Jamin Davis was one of the bigger first-round reaches on PFS draft board and the consensus board. One of those reaches where you're grabbing athleticism. What he could be in the NFL could be better than what he was at Kentucky.
Last year, Cameron Curl, 7th-round pick, was a player who contributed greatly for them. Yeah. I think Shaka Toney in the 7th round of this draft, like you were talking about athleticism next to Chase Young, like he's a player that by himself might not be a great pick, but in this defense, much like Curl the season ago, like might show out better than his draft capital would suggest.
Shall we move to the Dallas Cowboys here? Ready for the Dallas Cowboys. Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys receive a B draft grade from PFF, from Mike Renner. Remember, you can check out all of this stuff. If you don't want to just wait for us to walk through this, you can go to PFF.com right now. We have the draft grades right now on PFF.com. Also use promo code DRAFT30. 30% off any PFF subscription for access to all of the best NFL draft analysis. So for the Dallas Cowboys, Micah Parsons at number 12. They trade back from 10 to 12 after the two best cornerbacks in this draft, or arguably the best cornerbacks in this draft, and J.C. Horn and Patrick Surtain come off the board. Kelvin Joseph, an interesting player, a guy with some off-field stuff, some failed drug tests at LSU, transfers to Kentucky, but a raw athlete, a guy. There's a lot to like there, a project, maybe an interesting one off the field, but definitely a project. And then some other picks we like too. Osa Odigizua was good. I liked the Jabril Cox pick. Something that's consistent here though, Mike, with Micah Parsons, Kelvin Joseph, Josh Ball, all guys with a various levels of off-field concerns that the Dallas Cowboys just like passing on, I guess.
Yeah, and that's kind of been their MO. I mean, they signed Alden Smith, they signed Greg Hardy, they don't give a shit. So, but Micah Parsons, obviously a better player than 12th overall. He was 9th on the PFF draft board. Like we said, the best linebacker we've scouted. Exceptional, I think he steps in right away and starts over either Van Der Esch or Jalen Smith there. But then you look in that third round, I think they had an emphasis on run defenders. One of the worst run defenses in the NFL last year. Chauncey Golston, Osa Odigizua, defensive end from Iowa, and the defensive tackle from UCLA, both plus run defenders, long, powerful body types of their respective positions. And I think they immediately come in and at least can bring that to the table. Not sure either offers much as a pass rusher, but you could see with who they drafted, Parsons, Odigizua, Golston, they wanted that run defense to improve.
Osa Odigizua, I didn't bring this up on the show. I can't believe it. I always bring up the interview stuff. Osa Odigizua, after his freshman year of high school, never lost a high school wrestling match. And there was this one big, highly televised one where he had to face this guy out of Hawaii. And they came over and he beat him down, bad. Osa Odigizua, crazy wrestler, talks a lot about that low center of gravity. And a lot of people like former wrestlers in the NFL. Odigizua, one of the picks I like for Dallas.
Yeah, it's just an interesting draft because, like you said, Mike, run defense, they emphasize the front seven.
Yeah.
They're already loaded at linebacker with Leighton Van Der Esch, with Jalen Smith. They signed Keon O'Neal, a safety, and said, nope, he's playing linebacker for us. So they have decisions to make here with 5 legitimate linebackers either that were there, were signed, or were drafted. And then the other question is we thought they had a big need at corner. It did feel a little bit like they may have missed out on Patrick Surtain and J.C. Horn. Yeah. And so Kelvin Joseph, there's a lot of pressure on him maybe to step up and play right away. So he's a bit of the wild card in this whole thing. I think Parsons can step in and play right away, but if Joseph can, that's what makes this draft, potentially a slam dunk.
Shall we move on to the Philadelphia Eagles, a B- grade according to PFF. According to PFF's Mike Renner, you manage all of the draft grades here on PFF.com. Make sure to check those out. Philadelphia Eagles, they trade up from 12 to 10 to go grab Devontae Smith, the wide receiver out of Alabama. And then at 37, one of the top interior offensive linemen in this class, Landon Dickerson, who had battled injuries at Alabama. It's a big reason why he fell. No injuries for Landon Dickerson. I mean, we're talking about a legit steal. I mean, this guy probably goes in the first round if the injuries didn't hit him. And Milton Williams, an interesting player out of Louisiana Tech, a guy that had pro day testing similar to Aaron Donald. He's not Aaron Donald yet, but maybe he'll never will be. But Milton Williams, man, the testing is absurd. A nice project pick there at 73.
Yeah, it's a very interesting draft. You get one guy with massive injury red flags, Landon Dickerson. Top 15, 20 talent, had he not, he might go over Elijah Vera Tucker. If this guy never tears his ACL. But he's tearing it twice. And he tore it last year in the SEC title game. And that's obviously why he falls to number 37 overall. So they don't need him to come in and start right away. They got Jason Kelsey, but this is a forward-thinking move to the future. When he is healthy, he will be the heir apparent. Either him, could even play guard for Brandon Brooks if they move on from him after there's multiple injuries. So like that pick, if, again, he stays healthy. Devontae Smith, we said top 8 player on the PFF draft board. Slam dunk for them. Had to move up a little bit to do so, to get it, but I mean, you're going to step in and get a much, much better player at the receiver position than you had in Jalen Reagor. And then the Milton Williams. So you got kind of a certainty in Devontae Smith. Then Milton Williams is this complete unknown. I mean, you watch him on tape, and the athleticism shows up, but it is hit and miss. He runs hot and cold, has some dominant stretches, and then some games where he can just get taken out completely. Not great length for the defensive tackle position, a pure 3 technique. You hopefully get him around Fletcher Cox and have Fletcher Cox teach him a thing or two about a bull rush, because that could go a long way with how just freakishly athletic this dude is.
Sam, what was your favorite pick of the Philadelphia Eagles draft class?
I mean, it would be Devontae Smith on the grounds that I just think he is a phenomenal wide receiver. I think both the top two receivers in this class, which for us were Jamar Chase and Devontae Smith, were better than any receiver from last year's draft class as prospects. And I think if you didn't know that Devontae Smith was rocking out there at 166 pounds, you'd say he's the best. I think his tape is better than Jamar Chase's, but because it's so close, you just default to the guy that's 200 pounds, not 166. But Devontae Smith is the best route runner. He's got phenomenal hands. He's got great body control. He is an outstanding receiver prospect and should be like the best receiver on the Eagles roster, which is something that they're going to need with Jalen Hurts, a quarterback whose accuracy has been spotty so far and who needs, as much help around him as possible.
Mike, you didn't even bring up one of your favorite picks of the draft, Patrick Johnson, at 234. What are the Eagles getting in Patrick Johnson?
He's one of the most skilled edge defenders in the draft class, and he's athletic too. Like I'm surprised he lasts this long. The reason why, 240 pounds. That is on the small side for the position. Not a lot of guys can hold up at the NFL at that size. Still needs to put on some weight, but I like the pick. Like they have a good track record there, Philly, of developing dudes.
All right, let's go ahead now and pick the division following the 2021 NFL Draft. To give some odds before you flip your boards, please. Before you flip your boards, hold your water, fellas. Dallas Cowboys are favored to win this division at -115. The Washington Football Team at +275. And then the New York Giants and the Philadelphia Eagles close at 425 and 450. This is one of the closer divisions, as it was last year. One of the closer divisions. Who ultimately wins this division? Hold them up.
This is the most absurd number. The fact that the Giants had the same odds as the Eagles, who are like awful.
Wow, I got Dal here. I'm a big
fan.
fan.
Are you predicting or saying the best bet?
Over time, I'll win more than you guys.
I like Dallas. I like Dallas a lot. I think Dallas still wins this one. +115, I wouldn't bet it. +115, I wouldn't bet it. But I do think Dallas wins this division.
It's a close division, and it's also looks like it's a lot better than last year. So last year it was really close, but everybody was kind of crappy. This year it's close, and everybody might actually be okay.
All right, here. Question on the NFC East. Which quarterback in the NFC East do you trust most after Dak Prescott? So Ryan Fitzpatrick, obviously playing. Ryan Fitzpatrick? Yeah, Ryan Fitzpatrick. I don't know why it sounded weird. I guess I always call him Fitzmagic. Ryan Fitzpatrick for the Washington Football Team, Daniel Jones for the New York Giants, or Jalen Hurts for the Philadelphia Eagles. Your favorite, Steve, I'll start with you. Your favorite quarterback of those three?
Do I have to choose?
You have to choose.
Oh, man, it's like the most volatile guys
they
in
are,
the NFL.
That's very true.
Honestly, the Fitzpatrick track record is incredible. His last 3 years, as he's heading into his age 38 season, his last 3 years have been his best. So I'll say Ryan Fitzpatrick. I still don't know what we're getting from Daniel Jones or Jalen Hurts.
I'm going to go Daniel Jones.
Nobody wants to choose.
I think he takes a step forward this year.
You just pick him to win the division, so you better be picking Daniel Jones.
Maybe not into franchise quarterback status, but I think he plays well enough this year, obviously, to win the division.
My favorite here, the highest graded quarterback after Dak Prescott in 2021 will be Ryan Fitzpatrick. I'm going to say it right now. Ryan Fitzpatrick, my favorite after those three. Eric?
Who's
Sam?
Yeah.
I'm with you. I think Fitzmagic, with the talent that they've amassed around him, Ryan Fitzpatrick, one of the things that gets ignored last year is we're talking about all the upgrades that they've made around Fitzpatrick. They also made a massive upgrade at quarterback. Like Fitzmagic is way better than either Haskins or even Alex Smith was last season. He's a better player than people are giving him credit for.
The question was best quarterback after Dak Prescott in this division. Your favorite, I guess.
My favorite.
Who's going to grade the highest?
I think Daniel Jones has a chance to be pretty good. Last year he graded a lot better than the perception was.
Let's do it with that. All right, we're going to cut to break here, and then when we get back, we're going to talk a little AFC East. Talk the Jets, Dolphins, Patriots, Bills. Just in case you didn't know which teams are in the AFC East, we're going to break here, and when we get back, we're talking draft grades, baby. Let's do it.
Football is, in my opinion, the most complex sport. It's not even close.
Chris Collinsworth has more.
I'm Chris Collinsworth. I work for NBC Sports. I am a broadcaster.
Football.
Everything in business is speed related. Somebody's going to get there with machine learning, with AI. We want to be the first ones.
PFF analyzes football in more detail than anybody else on the planet.
And that is some throw.
Best NFL rivalries, Bears, Packers. Packers, Bears.
Rodgers played some of the best football we've ever seen.
Don't want to see that pass rush. There's always a real buzz at the start of football season. And for us, that excitement is part because we've really improved our systems. We're embracing machine learning. We're embracing AI. We present information that we've gathered to the teams, to the people that are playing fantasy football, to the fans, and we put perspective on the game of football. So let's take a play, for example. Aaron Rodgers throws a perfect pass down the field, which clangs off the receiver's hands, and it bounces to a defensive back trailing behind.
And it's intercepted.
The box score will tell you that Aaron Rodgers threw an interception, a huge negative. PFF, on the other hand, is going to give Aaron Rodgers a great grade. So what we're trying to do is evaluate not necessarily the result or the stat of the play, but what really happened.
And positive that ball location. That's incredible.
The data is so much bigger than what my team can do with it. Our plan was, let's partner with somebody that can help us with the data.
The most important thing for us was to build a system that was seamless. So we moved our whole infrastructure into the AWS cloud.
So the math is crazy, but it's predictive, right?
Machine learning allows us to get very, very quickly to very complex data. And the AI allows us to see the connections within the data that the human beings can't.
AWS is allowing us to go through the machine learning phase together, and we can now predict future performance based on the data of the past.
Things like our passing grade will generally correlate.
Seems like
I'm going to stack the line of scrimmage. I'm going to force him to have to throw the ball.
If you are addicted to the game, which I think I am, I think I'm addicted to the game, the passion of the study itself becomes really significant. But we have the data, we have the analysis, and now we have AWS and the computing power and skills of that team. We're going to truly change the game.
To the PFF NFL Draft Recap Show, we are joined now, excited to be joined by birthday boy Mark Ross, former New York Giants executive, general manager, two-time Super Bowl champion. Mark, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
All right, with Mark here. Mark, we got to ask you about the entire draft weekend here. And, you know, when you're watching all the wheeling and dealing and all the moves, was there a team that stood out to you? Who had the best draft this weekend from what you've seen?
Overall, I thought Miami had the best draft just because they were able to address needs on both sides of the ball with really, really good players with great value. So you got Jalen Waddell there at the top, but also Liam Eichenberg in the second round to help Tua. But then getting Jalen Phillips at 18, who I thought was the best pass rusher in the draft, was tremendous. And then Javon Holland in the second, maybe the best safety in the draft. So I thought the Dolphins really crushed it, but on both sides of the ball.
When you were approaching a draft, how much did you factor in needs versus the old hashtag best player available? How does that factor into your decision making, looking at your depth chart as you're going into the draft?
You always hear after a pick they say we took the best player on the board, But look, you have draft meetings because you talk about your needs as well. But what you don't want to do is overvalue players because of need. You want to set your board based off of who's best or worst at each position, and then best or worst overall with your players. And then definitely when you have draft meetings, when you're in the draft, you talk about those needs. So if you have players of equal value and you have a position of need more, then you're going to address that first. It's just if you think you need a safety, but he's your sixth-rated player at that time, you don't want to jump better players to take a perceived position of need.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It makes it a lot easier than saying best player available versus just filling needs. How about on the other end, teams that maybe had you scratching your head with their drafts this weekend?
A few of those, of course, every draft you go into was going to be the big shock in the first round. For me this year, it was the Alex Leatherwood pick with Las Vegas, where I thought it was completely his value could have been more towards the middle of the second, third round, as you saw most of those tackles go in that kind of range. But also, almost the Seattle with the Jamal Adams trade. So this is how you have to look at it in the long run, where at the time you're trying to justify it, but now once you actually see the results of giving up all those picks, Seattle only has 3 picks. Next year they're out of it first as well, and you really look at it and saying, was that worth it? And to me, it really is not. Unless they win the Super Bowl, which doesn't look like they're on the trajectory to do, you kind of wrecked your team a little bit. So those two, New Orleans, I thought kind of reached with Peyton Turner in the first round. So, and of course, we won't even talk about Houston and the dearth of draft picks that they had, and in the first pick, they end up taking a quarterback. So those teams kind of stand out for me.
It sounds like you're kind of on our side here. We talk a lot at PFF about trading down, accumulating as many lottery tickets as possible. How did you balance that when you're in the chair and you have chances to either trade for players for picks or trading up and giving up multiple picks to do that? How did you balance that? Did you lean one way strategically through your time?
Yeah, well, the joke going into this year was about the Giants never trading down, and for whatever reason, we just hadn't done that. We kind of had players we really wanted and didn't want to miss out on. So when you trade out, if you have a group of players that you really like and you're afraid to miss out on that group, when you trade back, that's the concern. When you trade up, you're kind of really targeting, all right, we need that guy. Do we think we can get him? The year we did that was Landon Collins. We had him as a first round pick. He didn't go in the first. Going in the second day, we really targeted him and went and got him. So it's really just a balance of how comfortable you are with the amount of players that are on the board if you trade out that you don't want to miss out on. And if you're going up, is there really a player you think can be a difference maker and not you're just trading up for the sake of trading up? But just mentioning the Giants, I mean, I thought they did a tremendous job getting quality players, but also when they move back, but also securing those picks for next year. So they'd be right up there with me, too, with the Dolphins as far as having the best draft because they got players and got picks.
Yeah, we just wrapped up complimenting a lot of what the Giants did in this draft. And you talk about missing out on players. The Eagles' war room was fascinating. In the third round, they dropped from 70 to 73. They end up drafting Milton Williams, but there's footage of the war room not being completely ecstatic with the pick. You usually see a lot of celebrating. We've got some half-hearted fist bumps, and reportedly Howie Roseman said they just missed out on a player, so they traded down 3 spots and missed out on a guy that they really, really wanted. Is there a guy that you've ever just missed out on? Who have you missed out on, Mark, that you're still kicking yourself about?
Yeah, that was kind of funny to see that, and that's why you don't have cameras in your draft room. But that's also why you have to have a group of players that you're comfortable with, and that's what I mentioned before about not trading out of there and missing out. So the Eagles just must not have talked about that situation where if we trade out of this pick, we're still comfortable with this group of guys. But for me, I guess it was the 2016 draft where it was the Laramie Tunsil gas mask situation right before the draft. So we had played out all the different scenarios about our pick at 10, and we were comfortable with whatever one happened. We could have never expected the gas mask, but for us it was we really wanted Leonard Floyd, and then the Rams jump up in there and get him. Chicago, I'm sorry. And then we really went and had Jack Conklin targeted, and then Tennessee traded up in front of us like 8-9, and we were at 10. Like, wow! It kind of took the win out of it. Even though we knew if we got in that situation, we had the numbers counted, and then Tunsil would have been the guy or whoever fell out of there. But and then Eli Apple would have been picked, or we tried to trade out. So, but it really just kind of never had a situation where exactly the picks, 2 picks right in front of us, teams actually traded in there to take 2 guys that we really targeted. So that kind of was a little rough for us, but we had already talked about what we would do. So we were a little bit shocked, but we had talked about it.
You guys prepare for everything in your draft meetings, except the gas mask, of course. That threw everybody off back in 2016. Mark Ross, happy birthday, and also thanks for joining us here in the PFF NFL Draft Recap. All right, when we come back, AFC East time. Austin already listed those teams. We're going to grade every single draft right after this.
Everything in business is speed related. Somebody's going to get there with machine learning, with AI. We want to be the first ones.
PFF analyzes football in more detail than anybody else on the planet.
And that is some
throw. Best NFL rivalries: Bears, Packers.
Bears, Packers.
Packers, Bears.
Rodgers played some of the best football we've ever seen.
Don't want to see that pass rush. In part because we really improved our systems. We're embracing machine learning. We're embracing AI. We present information that we've gathered to the teams, to the people that are playing fantasy football, to the fans, and we put perspective on the game of football. So let's take a play, for example. Aaron Rodgers throws a perfect pass down the field, which clangs off the receiver's hands, and it bounces to a defensive back trailing behind.
And it's intercepted.
The box score will tell you that Aaron Rodgers threw an interception, a huge negative. PFF, on the other hand, is going to give Aaron Rodgers a great grade. So what we're trying to do is evaluate not necessarily the result or the stat of the play, but what really happened.
Positive that ball location. That's incredible.
The data is so much bigger than what my team can do with it. Our plan was, let's partner with somebody that can help us with the data.
The most important thing for us was to build a system that was seamless. So we moved our whole infrastructure into the AWS cloud.
So the math is crazy, but it's predictive, right?
Machine learning allows us to get very, very quickly to very complex data. And the AI allows us to see the connections within the data that the human beings can't.
AWS is allowing us to go through the machine learning phase together, and we can now predict future performance based on the data of the past.
Things like our passing grade will generally correlate with passer rating also.
If you are addicted to the game, which I think I am, I think I'm addicted to the game, the passion of the study itself becomes really significant. But we have the data, we have the analysis, and now we have AWS and the computing power and skills of that team. We're going to truly change the game.
Back to grade the AFC East. Going to start with the New York Jets here. Excited to do it, man. Outside of, we talked a little bit, Steve, about the decision to trade up for Elijah Vera-Tucker, who will likely kick inside to guard at the next level, play alongside Mekhi Becton. Outside of that, they lost 2 third-round picks there. They gave them to the Minnesota Vikings. We already talked about what the Vikings did about that, with that draft class. We already talked about that, getting Kellen Mond and Wyatt Davis. You'd almost would have rather seen the Jets do something along those lines. But they traded for Elijah Vera-Tucker. Regardless of that process, they got good players, man. They got really, really good players. The Jets, an A draft class here. Zach Wilson, quarterback, obviously at number 2. That was the betting favorite since his pro day. And then after that, Elijah Vera-Tucker, like I said, traded up from 23 to 14 to get Elijah Vera-Tucker. And then Elijah Moore, one of Mike's favorite wide receivers in the draft class. They get him at 34. Mike, your thoughts on this draft?
Yeah, in terms of the players they picked, one of my favorites in the entire draft. In terms of where they got them, Zach Wilson, obviously, a nice consolation prize if you weren't going to have the number 1 overall pick. Guys like him aren't always available at number 2 overall. That is a talented franchise-type quarterback prospect who, if Trevor Lawrence doesn't exist, he goes number 1 overall, and it's not even a debate. So that one you obviously love. The Elijah Vera-Tucker pick, the trade, the process of it, we'll debate, and the value of a guard, we'll debate.
I'll debate in a minute.
The player they got, there's no debate. Mm-hmm. This guy's going to be as good.
Very true.
This guy could be a Pro Bowl guard sooner rather than later. I think he steps in and is at least a quality offensive guard. I bet you slide him in right next to Mekhi Becton, and you have the blindside lockdown for Zach Wilson. And I was saying all with the Bengals pre-draft. How do you ruin a rookie quarterback? The quickest way to do so is without pass protection, is by giving him a bad offensive line. Now you have at least the makings of a good offensive line at left tackle and left guard there. Still some work to do, but that is a good start. And then Elijah Moore, I said it, the best slot receiver in this draft class. I think he could be more than a slot receiver. Ridiculously good ball skills. Over 60% of his contested catches he hauled in the past 2 years. Those are great numbers for a guy who's 5'9", 178. I mean, he is tough as it gets over the middle of the field. To get him, again, that's a quarterback's best friend. I'll keep saying it. That's a quarterback's best friend, is a guy who gets open. Not a running back, not a tight end, a guy who gets open and gets open quickly. That's Elijah Moore.
I agree with the players, Mike. I mean, they drafted a lot of good players. They're moving in the right direction. I can't help but wonder, the same thing I complimented the Vikings for, with a massive offensive line need, much like the Jets have.
Yep.
If the Jets did not make that trade, and they sat at 23, and they drafted Christian Darrisaw and got the guy that the Vikings got, Wyatt Davis. If they had two pieces on the offensive line instead of just one. So again, from a trade-up standpoint, you're asking Elijah Vera-Tucker to be worth, essentially, let's say 2 players. He needs to be as good as 2 players for it to be worth it. Whereas I'm looking at their right tackle situation. They have George Fant, who's never graded above 61 in his entire NFL career using PFF grades. That's terrible. If Darrisaw is the right tackle and Wyatt Davis is the left guard, this offensive line looks so much better.
Well, and they could have drafted Brady Christensen to get both guard spots and a tackle. Like, you could have completely overhauled this offensive line with those third rounders.
We have no idea how far Elijah Vera-Tucker would have slid if the Jets hadn't been the team to take him. Remember, the Minnesota Vikings, it's the perfect case study on why this is not great process, right? Pre-draft, we were expecting Darrisaw to go like one position before Minnesota to the Chargers. Chargers end up getting Slater. The Vikings still trade back and end up getting him anyway. That could have been the case for the Jets. Like, they went up and got a guy like Vera-Tucker. If they'd left it alone, maybe he would have been there anyway. And the picks that we're complimenting Minnesota for later on, with getting a guard who could potentially start for them, with getting a quarterback that means they're taking the backup position seriously, even if he's not challenging to start, those were picks that you generate off this move. So Vera-Tucker might be a great player, but 1, you don't know that he was going to be gone when you picked, and 2, you are sacrificing the opportunity to take 2 more potentially very useful players to secure him.
Offensive linemen were a lot cheaper in this draft than we anticipated. The over-under was 6.5. It only got to 4 or 5 in the first round. So, yeah, the Jets just mispriced the marketplace here. Minnesota did a good job in that particular spot. But they do get a good player. Elijah Vera-Tucker has a really good projection and should be good for them, but you wish they got 2.
We talked a lot about those first 3 picks. I think everyone has. Zach Wilson, Elijah Vera-Tucker, Elijah Moore, all very, very good picks. But after that, they also got a handful of other above-average picks, according to PFF's live draft tracker here. Michael Carter, running back at the UNC, safety, maybe linebacker at the next level, Jamie Sherwood, and then even further down, I really liked the Jonathan Marshall pick at 207, another player that they got. A lot of values there for the Jets, even on day 2, day 3.
The Michael Carter pick in top of round 4, pick 107, is why we say running backs don't draft him high, because that guy produced at an elite level on a college football field last year. Produced at almost the identical level to a Javonte Williams, his teammate, who goes to the top of the second and is a high-level athlete. It has a lot of tools that project well in the NFL. A good receiving back. Like, there's a lot of things to like about Michael Carter. He can start from day 1 for the New York Jets. That is why we say those guys exist in the 4th round. There's not a lot of other positions that are sitting on the board in the 4th round where you can say that guy can come in and start right away and play in the NFL. Not a lot. Running backs 1.
All right, let's now jump to the Miami Dolphins. We gave their draft class a B+. I was a huge fan of a lot of the players they got. Jalen Waddle at number 6, Jalen Phillips, one of my favorite defensive players in the class at 18. There's reasons to think maybe that was a little bit of a reach. There's concerns about his medicals. He was forced to retire from UCLA football after suffering multiple concussions and then came back to Miami, Florida to play some football there. Javon Holland, Oakland's own Javon Holland, former Oregon safety, coming out the board at 36, opted out of 2020, and I think people forgot about him. I honestly think this guy could have been a first-round player if he plays in 2020. 3 of my favorite players in the draft right there. And I also love the Liam Eichenberg pick as well. Yeah. Like, again, B+ for good reason. A lot of really good picks.
Yeah, very similar sort of B+ to the Bengals B+, where it's just like, player where we draft him, player where we draft him, player where like, that is just exact value according to the PFF draft board of all those picks. Now, the only somewhat questionable thing is, did they make that move a little too early, going up from 12 to 6 to get Jalen Waddle, giving up a future first rounder? Jalen Waddle's worth the 12th, not only 12th overall pick, but wherever they're drafting next year. That's a little rich, considering, the difference between him and a guy like Devontae Smith, who goes 10th overall, that the Eagles ended up getting. Devontae Smith was the higher guy on our draft board by the end of the year. There was not a massive difference in the quality of prospect they were getting. Obviously different players, but difference in quality of prospect. It was not worth another first-round pick.
Agreed. And there's so much projection in the Jalen Waddle pick. He's being comped to Tyreek Hill a lot, and anytime you're doing that, it's probably a little bit risky. But he is the closest thing in terms of size, speed, strength, athleticism. The way you describe Tyreek Hill also fits the bill for Jalen Waddle. And he has some pretty spectacular college numbers, averaged almost 4.5 yards per route in his college career, averaged a perfect NFL passer rating when targeted in his college career. Those are pretty insane. But even when you look at, everybody throwing up highlights of what Jalen Waddle can do and all those big plays at Alabama, so many of them are just from the slot against off coverage, running double moves that don't really exist in the NFL. That role is going to change, and you have to have confidence that he can still do all of that stuff against much meaner, more aggressive coverage, which I think is possible, but way less of a sure thing than Devontae Smith, and that wouldn't have cost you the future first-round pick.
And I'll say this about the Eichenberg pick, 42 overall, the Notre Dame tackle, far more NFL ready than even Austin Jackson was, who they drafted at 18 last year. Far more NFL ready than Robert Hunt was. This guy can step in and start from day one.
Where do you expect him to play out of the gate?
It's a good question. I would imagine he just takes over Eric Flowers' left guard because he has shorter arms, 32.25 inches, shorter than the 33-inch cutoff that a lot of teams have. I think there's only one tackle in the NFL that had sub 33-inch arms that started last season for the whole season.
Let's move now to the New England Patriots, who took Mac Jones in the first round. That was the big name pick. We kind of stopped talking about it, though. Mac Jones was selected at number 15 overall, and then after that, obviously went after Christian Barmore. They made a trade up for Christian Barmore. Graphic, not at 14 overall. It was at 38th overall. They traded up to go get a guy that was number 12 on PFF's draft board. He was number 12 on PFF's draft board. They saw him falling, made a trade up to make sure they got Christian Barmore, the defensive tackle out of Alabama. I also like where they got Ronnie Perkins, an edge that I was lower on probably versus the consensus or versus others. But, man, at 96, I think that is a good value for Ronnie Perkins. First 3 picks, really like those.
Yeah, the Mac Jones one's obviously going to define the draft. That is it. How he translates to the NFL, how he translates to a worse situation than what he had at Alabama, the NFL game, without the big arm, without the athleticism that everyone obviously harped on and George couldn't stop talking about over draft season. That's gonna define this one. And what they do offensively there, and what they've obviously done over the course of Tom Brady's career, not a lot of that stuff mattered in that offense. Brady's arm for that offense, it helped, but a lot of times they would win games where it didn't really come into play. So Mac Jones, I think, could still be successful there, but that's going to define this draft.
I mean, the Patriots have always just played to their skill sets of their players, too. I mean, Cam Newton was, a run for, he ran a ton in the design run game last year. That's how they built their offense. So they'll find a way to build around Mac Jones. I don't know if he plays a ton this year, to be honest. I mean, I don't know. Knowing the Patriots, too, they're not going to. Eric always talks about justifying your first-round pick. The Patriots aren't going to do that. They weren't forcing N'Keal Harry targets a couple years ago when he didn't earn them. So Mac Jones will play when he's ready. It might be Cam Newton's team for this season. And as far as this season goes, the Patriots have made a lot of good moves. Christian Barmore will immediately help them on the defensive interior, and Ronnie Perkins can be just a pass rush specialist maybe earlier in the year, even though he's a pretty good run defender as well. So I thought they added 3 guys. Mac Jones will define the draft, but they also added 2 guys on the defensive line who will contribute.
The difference between the Pats this year and last year is that when Cam Newton does not perform, they're going to have an out, right? Cam Newton, when he got COVID, they went to Brian Hoyer and he stunk, and then Jared Stidham and he stunk, and there was really nothing to do other than put Cam Newton in the game. And, with the exception of the game against Seattle and the final game against the Jets, he was really poor all season. So if he doesn't perform this year, then they're just going to go to Mac Jones. But I agree with Steve. If Cam performs as he did, in 18 or 15, they'll stick with him.
And honestly, that's a great position to be in for the New England Patriots. If Cam Newton comes out and starts to earn his incentives on that contract and is being competitive and they can win this division, you have Mac Jones there developing the quarterback of the future. And if he doesn't, you get an early start on developing him in that offense, getting him reps and experience. I think that they're in a really good position. It's an A-plus draft. It's an A-plus draft for a reason. Let's now jump to the last team here in the AFC East. That's the Jets, Dolphins, Patriots, Bills, by the way, if you didn't know that. Bills at a B here. The Buffalo Bills are in a B grade. Really double dipping along the defensive line to start here. Edge, Gregory Rousseau out of Miami, Florida at 30, and then at 61, one of Mike's guys, Carlos Basham Jr., nicknamed Boogie Basham Jr. out of Wake Forest. One of the older prospects in this class. I see him contributing right away. Greg Rousseau, on the other hand, only one redshirt freshman season at Miami, Florida, opts out of the 2020 season due to COVID-19 concerns. We don't know what this guy is. I think Chris called him a nose tackle because he played a lot of nose tackle at as a redshirt freshman at Miami, but we don't know where he's going to play. We don't know what he's going to weigh at. He was 246 as a redshirt freshman at Miami, got up to 265, 270, where he was before obviously entering the draft class. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with these guys.
Yeah, I like the players where they got them. It's kind of similar to what I said about the Colts draft, where it's I'm not sure exactly how these guys impact your football team this year. Rousseau, Is he going to be a 3 technique? Is he going to be a DPR in the interior? I think that's probably his best chance of seeing the field year one. Basham probably in the almost identical role to what you would play from Gregory Rousseau right out the gate. So that's kind of the curious thing there. And then Spencer Brown, their 3rd rounder, pick 93 overall, a pure project at offensive tackle. About as athletic as it gets for the position, but you're going to have to rebuild this dude from the ground up in his technique and pass protection. Like, he can't see the field this year.
He's on the ground right now. He jumped through a table last night or 2 nights ago. I mean, B is for big in this draft. They got monster defensive ends. They got monster offensive tackles. They've invested heavily on the defensive line. The last 3 years, 5 guys in the first 2 rounds with Ed Oliver, with Rousseau. Don't forget last year, AJ Epinesa. So, I mean, they want to be able to rush with 4, and I think they're still trying to find that. They still need to improve around Jerry Hughes, who's been their best pass rusher for a while. But you said it might not help them this year, Mike. Did they need a ton of help? You know, they're not the Bucs, but they are really good. You know, across their roster, assuming everybody plays, the same.
I mean, a favorite to win the division for a reason.
They are, and so they didn't have a ton, so they could play a little. You know, let's look to next year. Let's look to the future, and I think B's a solid, grade for this.
They need a good draft though. They've had a few iffy drafts in the past handful of years. Ever since the Josh Allen pick, they really have not had impact guys with those other picks.
But unlike the Colts, they don't necessarily need, they don't have a glaring spot that necessarily needed to fill like the Colts with left tackle. So you're right, they need a good draft, but they don't necessarily need like an impact starter on one specific spot.
Exactly. They haven't hinged on any. Like last season, they got Zach Moss, who's a contributor at running back. Gabriel Davis, 7 touchdowns as their 4th wide receiver. They had a kicker, right, that ended up being their starting kicker. And over time, like they've put themselves in such a nice spot where their future fortunes are never pinned on any one draft pick, which we've seen around the league be a failure sort of formula.
Alrighty, let's go ahead and pick the division here. Not the best draft, but let's pick the winner of the AFC East. Before you show your boards, just kidding. Eric's already all it. But I want to give the odds. Just want to give the odds. Just show you what we got. Buffalo Bills right now, -150 to win the division with Josh Allen. Miami Dolphins and New England Patriots tied at +333
Absurd.
to win this division. And after that, Jets +2,000, obviously starting a new quarterback. New system, the deep dark horse there to win the division. Who do you got?
Dolphins. Going with the favorite.
I'm going Cam, baby. I think +333 too. I think it's an interesting bet. I think there's a lot of reason the narrative would be, focusing in on like the Pats weren't good last year, but they're the most improved team. If you look at the free agency improvement index on PFF.com, the most improved team before the draft. And then they have an A+ draft, adding a lot of talent with Christian Barmore. Mac Jones is there if Cam Newton not necessarily does battle some injuries, or if he doesn't start to play well. I like that a lot too.
We need to separate because we didn't love the Patriots spending spree, but we have to separate what that's going to do for the team this year versus whether or not we liked all the money spent. Yeah, did they overpay for Matthew Judon? Yes. Overpay for Jonnu Smith? Yes. Hunter Henry? Pretty close. Jalen Mills? Yes. But will these guys help the team this year? Yes, because last year they had the worst tight end situation in the NFL.
I don't know about
Mills.
Years. We don't have to.
Mills, maybe not. We may have picked the wrong guy for that one, but they have Nelson Aguilar is going to help them. They have the worst group of receivers and tight ends over the last 2 years. They're in that bottom 3, so they will be better this year.
They also have like a really good offensive line. Like we don't even bring up their offensive line. It's one of the better offensive lines in football, in my opinion. And Cam, if he's helped, like people were hating on Cam last year. Like did not play well, never lived up to expectation. I mean, all of Boston wanted Jared Stidham to start. Like I'm disagreeing there. He had COVID and battled injuries. Like Cam Newton's coming back here, fade the narrative. Only getting paid $5 million on the base.
Well, the injuries
get in here, Wayne. Come in close.
When was the last time the Cam wasn't injured over a period?
It's true. No, that's true. But he also had COVID, man. He's coming back from COVID. It's tough. That's not happening this year. He's probably vaccinated. You have to hope. But Cam Newton, he stays healthy, plays a full 17-game season. I'm a huge fan of it, man. I think the narrative right now is that Cam Newton wasn't living up to the hype. I think he comes back a lot better than people think. All right, that's going to do it for the AFC East, the draft recap, and also just my infatuation with Cam Newton playing better next year. When we get back, we're going to look at as I move my papers here, NFC South. Going to do the draft grades for the NFC South, and we're going to pick that up off the floor. NFC South draft grades when we get back.
Football is, in my opinion, the most complex sport. It's not even close.
Chris Collinsworth has more.
I'm Chris Collinsworth. I work for NBC Sports. I am a broadcaster.
For the football.
Everything in business is speed related. Somebody's going to get there with machine learning, with AI. We want to be the first ones.
PFF analyzes football in more detail than anybody else on the planet.
And that is some throw.
Best NFL rivalries, Bears, Packers.
Bears, Packers.
Packers, Bears.
Rodgers played some of the best football we've ever seen.
Don't want to see that pass rush. There's always a real buzz at the start of football season. And for us, that excitement is part because we've really improved our systems. We're embracing machine learning. We're embracing AI. We present information that we've gathered to the teams, to the people that are playing fantasy football, to the fans, and we put perspective on the game of football. So let's take a play, for example. Aaron Rodgers throws a perfect pass down the field, which clangs off the receiver's hands, and it bounces to a defensive back trailing behind.
And it's intercepted.
The box score will tell you that Aaron Rodgers threw an interception, a huge negative. PFF, on the other hand, is going to give Aaron Rodgers a great grade. So what we're trying to do is evaluate not necessarily the result or the stat of the play, but what really happened.
And posit at that ball location. That's incredible.
The data is so much bigger than what my team can do with it. Our plan was, let's partner with somebody that can help us with the data.
The most important thing for us was to build a system that was seamless. So we moved our whole infrastructure into the AWS cloud.
So the math is crazy, but it's predictive, right?
Machine learning allows us to get very, very quickly to very complex data. And the AI allows us to see the connections within the data that the human beings can't.
AWS is allowing us to go through the machine learning phase together, and we can now predict future performance based on the data of the past.
Things like our passing grade will generally correlate.
Seems like
I'm going to stack the line of scrimmage. I'm going to force him to have to throw the ball.
If you are addicted to the game, which I think I am, I think I'm addicted to the game, the passion of the study itself becomes really significant. But we have the data, we have the analysis, and now we have AWS and the computing power and skills of that team. We're going to truly change the game.
Alrighty, we are back here, the Draft Recap Show, looking now at the NFC South. Look at the NFC South draft grades. We're doing draft grades for all 32 NFL teams here on the Draft Recap Show. But if you want to see your grades now, go to pff.com, check out the draft grades. It's in the feature slot on the homepage. Put it in there last night. Don't you worry. Go ahead and check that out. And then while you're there, PFF promo code DRAFT30, 30% off any PFF subscription on PFF.com right now. Getting into the NFC South. Going to start here with the Atlanta Falcons. Some interesting picks here. I know one we're probably going to focus on is one of the bigger reaches on day two for us. Jalen Mayfield does go at 68 to the Atlanta Falcons. But when you look at the start, I love the start. Kyle Pitts at 4, best non-quarterback in this draft class in my opinion. And then Richie Grant, UCF safety that can do so much. You talk about versatility in the secondary, man. I think Richie Grant can do so much for the Atlanta Falcons on the back end. They also got a San Diego State guy. Darren Hall, rise up, go Aztecs.
Yeah, Kyle Pitts here is obviously the one. Like Kyle Pitts, stud. Like the best tight end prospect ever, whatever. He's going to come in and be an impact player from day one. It wouldn't surprise me if he's, close to that upper echelon, that tier of 3 that we talked about, the Darren Waller, George Kittle, Travis Kelce, the actual difference makers at the tight end position, the guys that can go over 1,000 yards, the guys that can win one-on-one. Kyle Pitts can do that. We've seen him do that. So that pick obviously is going to be the game changer in this draft. But you were owning the number 4 overall pick because you're a bad team. You had a lot of holes. You filled another one in Richie Grant. To me, one of the safety was probably their biggest need on this roster. Really had no one to slot in there. Richie Grant, another NFL-ready guy. He is going to turn 24 as a rookie. He better darn well be NFL-ready. And he was. He was the highest run defense grade of any safety in this draft class last year. One of the most physical tacklers, has a big wingspan, a lot of reasons to think he can translate to the NFL in a versatile role and translate quickly. And like I said, the Mayfield one's the head-scratcher here, why they don't get a higher grade from us. Project offensive linemen, more often than not, they don't pan out. Like, he did not grade well. A 68.8 pass blocking grade back in 2019, his last full season. Now that's at tackle, and he's going to be on the interior, and it was his sophomore year. He is still young, only 20 years old. But the learning curve is so big on offensive line for good college offensive linemen entering the NFL. your upshot here is year 3, year 4, this guy starts to come good, and then you've wasted the rookie year. Then go sign a guard at that point. So to use the 68th overall pick on a guy like that, I just think it's going to be rough before it gets better if he starts right away, which he's probably going to at left guard.
One of the stories of the draft, too, is that Atlanta has a huge need on the entire defense, right? And they're sitting there at 4, and they don't have any good defensive players, and they're stuck with Kyle Pitts. That's too bad.
Yeah.
So Pitts is a good pick, but I thought they were going to go defense the rest of the draft. So a guy so Richie Grant, fine, but the Mayfield pick in the middle of that is where I do question things. And I think if you're a Falcons fan, you're still looking at this cornerback depth chart where you have A.J. Terrell, last year's first rounder. He was okay. But beyond that, it's just massive questions. Yeah. And the Bucs have like 8 different targets that you need to cover over the next couple of years. And the Saints, you have Sean Payton, developing the passing game there. It's not going to be easy. The Panthers are 4 deep at wide receiver now. The Falcons are 1 deep at corner. So that is where I am really concerned about the Falcons going forward, and I thought they would address that side of the ball a little bit more.
And when we rave about some of the teams that drafted really well this past weekend, we talk about how much they invest in the secondary with bodies. Not even just talent, but bodies. When you're 1 deep at corner, not a good place to be. When you compare that to other teams in the NFL, you got Baltimore, Cleveland, Tampa Bay, these teams that just throw the kitchen sink at resource in the secondary. Atlanta Falcons go in the opposite direction, and they don't have a good pass rush. That defense overall, man, that is some concern there for sure. All right, let's jump now to the Carolina Panthers, who obviously made the big decision to trade a future second-round pick, I think a 2022 second-round pick for Sam Darnold and some change for Sam Darnold, the former New York Jets quarterback. And after that, they had J.C. Horn at number 8 overall, the first cornerback off the board. I think my guy Eric made some cheddar on that draft prop for sure. Then 59, Terrace Marshall Jr., who fell. I thought he was a first-round talent. Mike had him as a first-round talent. He falls to 59 due to some injury concerns, I believe. And then Brady Christensen, an uber-athletic offensive tackle out of BYU that I think at 70 overall, he can start out of the gate. You kick him at guard out of the gate, and for a bad Carolina Panthers offensive line, love to see that. And then a Golden Domer, Tommy Tremble, your favorite tight end fullback prospect in the class.
Yeah, so this draft, what do we go for here? This draft, the J.C. Horn pick is the one where that gets you the B-. 18th on the PFF board. You got him 8th overall. I said on the show, I get why they did it. His tape's easy to fall in love with. The press man ability, the physicality he plays with, the mentality he plays with is different from other cornerbacks in this draft class. But that's not all it takes to play cornerback in the NFL. I don't think he's super versatile in his usage. He is going to be press only. And that's a coveted skill set. That's a rare skill set. But I thought at 8 overall, the value was just elsewhere in this draft class. I would have loved to have just seen them kind of take their medicine, take an offensive lineman, and get Sam Darnold some pass protection there and a guy like Rashawn Slater.
Feels like there's always a cornerback taken too high in every single draft. It's 20th on our board that ends up like C.J. Henderson last year, J.C. Horn, this year. And I feel like cornerback is one of those positions where it just takes so long to develop. If your draft, success hinges on him having success in year 1, that's going much like Detroit last year, that's going to look bad. Luckily for them, they got a first-round talent in Marshall. They got a first-round athlete, I think, in Brady Christensen to maybe help salvage that at least early on.
First-round athlete. You love to see that. Can you talk a little bit more, Sam, about the J.C. Horn selection? I know you talked about how a little bit lower on him compared to the consensus, and a big reason for that is just how he translates to the next level. Also, we didn't bring this stat up. We brought it up on day 1. Panthers played the lowest percentage of press coverage last year, large part because of the state of the cornerback room last year. Did not have a lot of guys that could play press at the line of scrimmage. Your opinion of the J.C. Horn pick and him as a prospect?
Yeah, I think as much of it is just that weird schematic fit. I'm not even hating on the idea that they went cornerback at number 8, but if you were going to do that, Patrick Surtain, to me, would have been a more obvious fit within this defense.
Fair.
I think potentially hits the ground running better than J.C. Horn does as well, even independent of the schemes that they're going to be in. So it's just that Mike said it right, that you can immediately understand why NFL teams fall in love with J.C. Horn. He's got those skills that they just like to see, aggression at the position, the size, the way he plays the game. But when you start to dive a little bit deeper and you start to say, okay, what is he going to be asked to do every single Sunday, and who is he going to be covering, and how is that going to translate within our specific defense, that's when you start to see a few more cracks appear in his tape. Whereas a guy like Surtain, I think, is actually almost the opposite. The more you dive into it, the more comfortable you are with his ability to just do all of those things right out of the gate. The only weakness that he has is he occasionally sort of opens the gate too early, lets a guy in on a slant, but that's the easiest thing in the world to fix versus the things that J.C. Horn struggles with.
Brady Christensen's the key to this draft. Of course, J.C. Horn and all that stuff, but if they get a starting tackle in the 3rd round in Brady Christensen, this is a huge steal. It's a huge win for the Panthers. Sam Darnold hasn't had a good offensive line his entire career. He might be itching to go back to the Jets, who now have Mekhi Becton and Elijah Vera-Tucker, because the left side, as of today, is Cam Erving and Pat Elflein. Neither guy has graded well at any point in their NFL career. So if Brady Christensen as a third-round pick, little older prospect, but good athlete and really productive PFF grades, elite PFF grades, if he steps in and plays, that could salvage the whole class here. So I think Christensen's one of the keys.
I was going to say, we'll know quickly about Christensen, too, because he's going to be 25. Like, if he doesn't step in and play right away and play well, there's not much room for development there, probably.
Steve, I want to come back to you for just one last comment on the Carolina Panthers. You bring up Brady Christensen, and obviously they had Terrace Marshall Jr. Have the Carolina Panthers done enough to prop up Sam Darnold? Do you think this is the best situation he's played in, and what are your expectations now for Sam Darnold in Carolina?
It's definitely the best situation because it starts with, Teddy Bridgewater had a 66 PFF grade last year, and he dropped off a little bit at the end of last year, but again, the best way to evaluate quarterbacks is using PFF grades. And sometimes when you see the grades and the stats not match, that's what happened last year with Teddy Bridgewater. He wasn't playing that great, but the stats were really good. That means Joe Brady, their offensive coordinator, was fantastic. Their playmakers were fantastic. They're all still there. You add Terrace Marshall to the mix. That's why the offensive line is my concern. If they are at least okay, the Panthers are going to move the ball. They're going to be very good offensively. Sam Darnold's going to have his best season statistically. He'll probably have his best season from a grading standpoint. So, yes, it's his best situation. Is it enough in the NFC South? No. But, yeah, Darnold's going to look a lot better here in 2021.
Teddy Bridgewater last season, just 2 games under 7 yards per pass attempt. That's sort of like the average gold standard for me. But yet he only had like 3 games over a 70 PFF grade.
Never chasing the ceiling.
You're talking about one of the best elevators among offensive coordinators that there is. So if Darnold can't succeed here,
that offensive line is a big concern. Like a quarterback's environment essentially comes down to 3 things. 1, receiving core, who he has to throw to. 2, the scheme, what is that doing to get everybody open? And 3, the protection. The Carolina Panthers are way better than the Jets in 2 out of those 3 areas. But the third might be just as bad as the Jets have ever had, and that might be enough to override the other 2.
Let's jump now to the New Orleans Saints. Their draft grade, according to PFF right now, is a C. They had edge defender Peyton Turner. The biggest reach, if you look at the athletic consensus board, not even just PFF's board, the biggest reach of any player it drafted in the first round, Peyton Turner coming out of Houston. They also add former Ohio State linebacker Pete Werner, a player that opted out of 2020, Paulson Adebo, cornerback of Stanford. Your opinion, Mike, of this draft class?
I didn't see Peyton Turner as that big of a reach. Mm-hmm. Like, that's his physical tool. That's why we say edge talent. The guys that the NFL identifies it well, because his physical tools are what can succeed at the NFL. Ridiculous length, ridiculously high cut, and very productive this year. Had a pass rushing grade over 90. Now, he only played 4 games, and he had played 3 years before that, and the guy really turned it on towards the end of his career. But his tape was very, very good. It was 4 games, and we here at PFF buy into larger sample sizes. If we saw that same, how he played in those 4 games over the course of a full season, yeah, sure, I can get on board with that. But then at the Senior Bowl, he didn't look as dominant. Yeah. Nowhere near as dominant as he did against lesser competition. And you feel not as great about that because if you're going to get on board with him, drafting him in the first round, you want him to dominate guys who he's going to face in the NFL, and he did not do that. So that one, again, I think everyone's calling it a reach. It is a bit of a reach, but it's a developmental prospect at this point with his physical tools, and he's get behind Marcus Davenport and Cameron Jordan. He's not going to start there. So that's why they make that move. The Werner pick, kind of the opposite. I don't really see him as this developmental high ceiling guy. He's kind of just a solid Alex Anzalone replacement in that defense. Adebo is an interesting one. Opted out in 2020. Ridiculous ball production, which we've seen to be fairly sticky going from college to the NFL. You're going to get that, but he is an up and down kind of guy. Has some double moves on his tape that he bites on. Doesn't have the best feet. More of a silo corner, in my opinion. So that's why he comes off the board at 76.
From a short-term perspective, I just don't love it because, as I mentioned throughout the weekend, wide receiver and corner, huge question mark for the Saints. And they need receivers more than ever because Drew Brees isn't there. Brees could always elevate a subpar receiving core. Jameis Winston needs these guys to throw YOLO balls to. He needs good receivers to take those aggressive shots down the field. And then, again, I'm going to point to the Bucs, who are rolling 5 deep at receiver and 3 deep at tight end. You need to be able to cover those guys. And there's at least 2 years of that with the Bucs and Tom Brady. And cornerback 2, so Paulson Adebo being the 76th pick overall, he has a chance to start. So again, much like Brady Christensen, Saints might be relying on their 3rd-round pick to make the biggest impact on their team here in year 1.
Talking about transitioning from a Hall of Fame quarterback to life after, the Saints 10 draft picks the last 2 years. One of them was quarterback Tommy Stevens. One of them was Ian Book, who's taken about 100 picks before he should have been. Like, to me, this is a roster that 2 years from now, when they're 3-14 or 3 and whatever it is, like,
that sounds so weird. By the way,
this is why. This is why the fact that they simply have not planned, and everybody who says the cap is fake, and everybody who says value in the draft is overrated. Like, the Saints are a classic example of mismanagement in this way.
And honestly, it shows how difficult it is to draft. In 2017, they had one of the best drafts in NFL history with Marshawn Lattimore and Ryan Ramczyk and Marcus Williams and Alvin Kamara and Trey Hendrickson. Oh my goodness, they were unbelievable. And can you judge drafts today? Yeah, because that day we said, wow, the Saints killed it. They have an incredible draft, and it was one of the best ever. Yep. The last few years, though, since that point, not even close. So they're still living off that 2017 draft class.
I wanted to dig in a little bit into Ian Book. Ian Book, they add him as a quarterback.
I'd rather not, honestly.
Former Notre Dame. Obviously, we don't have to keep bringing up. You studied Ian Book a ton. You didn't have a draftable grade on him, though.
No.
What are the Saints getting
He's
in
just
Ian
such
Book?
a limited thrower of the football. And it's not only that. He has a very weak arm. But it's also that he is slow decision maker. He has to see a guy open to hit him. And now he's accurate enough. And he won a lot at Notre Dame. And all intangibles, leadership, off the charts. Sure. That's not worth a 4th-round pick. That's a 6th, 7th-round pick if you want a guy in your quarterback room. If that's the reason you want a guy is his, personality or whatever. Don't waste a 4th-round pick. As we said, the draft's 4 rounds long. 4th round is still some sort of valuable picks. There are still guys that can come in and play a role for you. I don't see Ian Book playing a role. Just don't.
I mean, you just described a quarterback that doesn't have a role in the NFL, right? Not a very weak arm and not fast enough decision-making or processing to offset it, at which point, what are you?
All right, let's jump now to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers draft class. We gave them a B- for their 2021 NFL draft. I think a lot of that is hinging on that first pick. Joe Tryon, according to PFF's draft board, is one of the bigger reaches versus PFF's draft board. Largely a project. Did not play in 2020. Former Washington edge defender. I know I've talked a ton about. He's just completely changed his body. Like he said, he completely changed his diet this past season. Looks completely different. His teammates said he is just like big as hell now. Just a completely different player. When I talked to Tryon too, I'm gonna dig into this a little bit. He was saying, I don't even know what I'm gonna do. Like, I don't know what type of player I'm going to be. I am a completely different body. I have a completely different mindset going into the season. And after that, some picks I really liked. I love the Kyle Trask pick at 64, back into the second round. Hainsey is a versatile offensive lineman that you hyped up out of Notre Dame. And then Jalen Darden at 129, North Texas receiver. I mean, as a slot type, I'm a big fan of that as well. I think after that, I start to get really excited. The Joe Tryon pick, though, that's the reason I think this is a B-, right?
So what's the difference between Joe Tryon, who is 75th on our board, and guys like Jason Owe, Kwity Paye, who we say aren't super productive at the college level, but we are still buying into them? It's because they weren't super productive, but their level of athleticism at least ended up grading well. Like for Joe Tryon, he didn't even hit the thresholds of grading the last time we saw him. 62.0 run defense grade in 2019, 71.9 pass rushing grade. He is not an impact player on a college football field despite being billed as a freak athlete. And he is. Like, he has the explosiveness, the length that plays on the edge in the NFL. So he is behind sort of everything that the data says in terms of guys who produce at the college level have a much, much better success rate, to a certain threshold, have a much, much better success rate than guys who are just literal, complete athletic projects.
All right, moving off the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here, we're going to pick the winner of the division. Before you throw your boards up here, I'm going to read the odds. Obviously, Tampa Bay Buccaneers minus 200 to win the NFC South in 2021. After that is the Saints at plus 300, the Atlanta Falcons at plus 800, and the Carolina Panthers at plus 1,200. I doubt we're going to see a lot of versatility, or not versatility, but variance in what the boards show here. It's the defending Super Bowl champs.
I actually think minus 200 is a value for Tampa. Yeah, I mean, like, this is like the New England back in the day. They were minus 400 to win the NFC East every year.
So I'll double down there.
Their defense is so good compared to the rest of that division's defense.
I mean, they return all 22 starters. I mean, they have it.
I mean, the Jalen Darden pick adds to a strength. Like, they're really strong where it matters most in the NFL.
I agree. I really like what they did in the draft. Obviously, the Joe Tryon pick, we'll debate it back and forth. But after that, really like what they did with Kyle Trask. I will say this. Who is the biggest challenger? You have it right now, plus 300, New Orleans Saints, plus 800.
Father Time.
Father Time.
Well, no, honestly, the only thing that could go wrong for the Bucs is that age actually does hit Tom Brady at 44, or that secondary falls apart. We always know how fragile the secondary can be.
Okay, can I rephrase the question?
I don't think that secondary's falling apart.
This is a situation where you look at longer-term markets, like what's on Symbol or whatever. You want to buy long-term into teams, like not just 2021. I think Carolina and Atlanta have a shot. I think, especially if you consider, what could happen to the Saints over time. Like those two, Atlanta and Carolina, I think, are two teams long-term that might have a shot.
If I told you two teams from this division make the playoffs in 2021, who's that second team? And tell me why.
It's Falcons.
Saints.
Atlanta.
I'll say the Saints,
They still have
Saints. High volatility Jameis plus Sean Payton.
Atlanta still has the most likely quarterback to be good, and they just added a unicorn to that offense in Kyle Pitts. In addition to Calvin Ridley, Julio Jones, the Falcons are the one team where you could imagine a fantastic offense taking shape, which would be enough potentially to offset a bad defense.
There are teams in the playoffs every year who have defenses that are as bad as Atlanta. They just have offenses that are as good as Atlanta's could be.
Saints still have a top 3 O-line, D-line combination in the NFL, probably. Like they're very good along the line of scrimmage. Jameis,
they have a tight
being
end
Jameis, but that's a good starting point.
I was going to say Carolina for a second, but I do agree the Atlanta Falcons. I think the Atlanta Falcons would be my pick there. Carolina, I just really like what they've done. I really do like what they've done outside of the Sam Darnold decision. The Sam Darnold decision and then the decision to pass on Justin Fields. Those two decisions, man, I've been really liking what the Carolina Panthers did. You could really think about them contending with the Atlanta Falcons, contending with the New Orleans Saints to be the number 2 team in this division. When we get back, we're going to look at the AFC West. Going to look at the AFC West, the draft grades for the AFC West when we get back.
Football is, in my opinion, the most complex sport. It's not even close.
Chris Collinsworth has more.
I'm Chris Collinsworth. I work for NBC Sports. I am a broadcaster.
Football.
Everything in business is speed related. Somebody's going to get there with machine learning, with AI. We want to be the first ones.
PFF analyzes football in more detail than anybody else on the planet.
And that is some
Best NFL rivalries, Bears, Packers. Packers, Bears.
Rodgers laid some of the best football we've ever seen.
Don't want to see that pass rush. There's always a real buzz at the start of football season. And for us, that excitement is part because we've really improved our systems. We're embracing machine learning. We're embracing AI. We present information that we've gathered to the teams, to the people that are playing fantasy football, to the fans, and we put perspective on the game of football. So let's take a play, for example. Aaron Rodgers throws a perfect pass down the field, which clangs off the receiver's hands, and it bounces to a defensive back trailing behind.
And it's intercepted.
The box score will tell you that Aaron Rodgers threw an interception, a huge negative. PFF, on the other hand, is going to give Aaron Rodgers a great grade. So what we're trying to do is evaluate
Draft recap show. We're moving on to the AFC West, and your glorious host, Austin Gale, is back and ready to go going through the AFC West, starting with the Denver Broncos. Guys, of course, the biggest question here with the Denver Broncos, what are they doing at the quarterback position? So, I don't know, how do we grade this draft when we don't know if they're going to actually get Aaron Rodgers and why they maybe passed on a Justin Fields?
Yeah, it's a difficult draft to grade because you have to make that decision on how are you going to grade the decision to pass on Justin Fields?
You asking me?
They're hoping Rodgers. They're hoping for Rodgers, right? They're reading the same reports we are.
This is in preparation for getting Aaron Rodgers. We've talked about it,
right? Otherwise, this is terrible.
We've talked about it. We've said Aaron Rodgers is not going to play in Green Bay. It's less than 5% chance. Rob Demoski, the ESPN reporter for the Green Bay Packers, saying he's not going to come back. And so, at the end of the day, someone in the Green Bay front office is going to realize that. It's going to get through their head and be like, oh, shit. If he's not coming back, we literally have to get something back for him. We have to. You can't just let that guy walk away and retire and get nothing for a franchise quarterback. You have the possibility to get multiple first-round picks in return. Even if they're not even if you're dealing them away and they're going to be end of the first rounders because that team's going to be good because they're going to have Aaron Rodgers starting, you got to go do it. So I think the most logical landing spot of any team in the NFL would be the Denver Broncos. And so this is a preparatory draft. And I love what they did with the Surtain pick, if this is, because they've invested a lot in this secondary. They, in free agency, adding Ronald Darby and Kyle Fuller, but they also drafted guys last year. They drafted Michael Ojemudia in the 3rd round, basically just saying, hey, we saw you as a rookie. we don't want you to see the field again. Sorry. We got Patrick Surtain here coming in, a scheme-versatile cornerback, one of the most scheme-versatile in this draft class. And I think NFL ready, too, to step in.
And Bryce Callahan, the best slot in the NFL the last 2 years.
Did any team get more value in the secondary than the Broncos in this draft? I mean, Surtain taken 2nd cornerback overall is a great value, right? Yeah. And then, Caden Stearns was well thought of, and Jamar Johnson was a lot higher in 5th round in our board. Yes. So when you look at, those 3 guys, and then, they get Javonte Williams, who's the best running back on our board. Now they traded up for him. That's a pretty high. Quinn Mennert's, again, guys who consistently sort of over or underdrafted in our world, that's a lot of good value. And again, the quarterback position is the only question. But being in a division with Kansas City, you're in sort of a less desperate situation, I think, if you're Vic Fangio and company.
Yeah, when you look at just the draft and evaluate just the players, it's a good draft. But the quarterback, it has to be held up in the context of the opportunity cost of not doing anything at quarterback yet. They haven't made a big trade for a veteran quarterback. They passed up the opportunity to go after one of the rookie quarterbacks. So right now, you're looking at a collection of players that are good, but Drew Lock is still the starting quarterback. Yeah. And that guy ranked 34th out of 42 in PFF grades last year, and even worse in adjusted accuracy or in adjusted completion rate, to the point where it was harming last year's top picks like Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler. So Drew Lock has the potential to drag this entire thing down in flames with him unless they are upgrading a quarterback. And right now, the only option left is convincing the Green Bay Packers to deal in Rodgers. This whole draft is sort of cast in a shadow.
Yeah, but what is this whole thing, though? Kyle Fuller's a veteran on a shorter deal. Von Miller's probably at some point going to leave. But the majority of their talent on the team, Bryce Callahan being another veteran, majority of the talent on the team, though, is young, cost-controlled talent. Mm-hmm. And they're in a division right now where Kansas City is minus 305 to win the division. It's not exactly they're not on the precipice of being decent like Washington and competing in that division. They're firmly 2nd or 3rd in that division, and essentially only something like Rodgers can get them over the top. So I don't actually hate necessarily as much the lack of a Justin Fields draft pick here because, again, that's speculative with respect to taking on Kansas City. It is really going to have to be something like Rodgers to put them in that contention.
I'm with Eric here. It's almost a bigger swing in their eyes. Like we always talk about, make the big swing at the quarterback position. It's a bigger swing to say, hey, no, let me get other positions because we're going to go all in for this guy.
We're going to then it feels like the Vikings with Favre, right?
If they're doing that, if they are doing that, I think absolutely, I'm on board. But we don't know that that's the case yet.
Because Fields is a longer-term situation. If they draft Fields at 9, right, he's going to, A, he has to hit, and then B, he has to develop. And then you're in a division with Herbert and Mahomes, and then, even Derek Carr is a decent quarterback. And so you're still a 1-in-4 shot of even winning that division?
Sure, but Herbert is a good example of why it might not be as much of a speculative shot at a quarterback than it used to. There's a pretty good record of recent rookie quarterbacks hitting the ground running, being significant steps forward over the disaster that they've inherited with that team. Like Justin Herbert in the same division did exactly that a year ago. We're sort of saying, well, a rookie might not fix anything, and it might. On the other hand, a rookie could be this year's Herbert.
Herbert had the nicest rookie year we've seen in a long time. Sure. Hit on a lot of variants, and the Chargers are still 6-1 to win the division. This is a humongous mountain to climb if you're any one of these AFC West teams to compete with Kansas City.
Let's get more into the draft class that they did have. Obviously, the Aaron Rodgers stuff is massive. If they get Aaron Rodgers and then make the decision to pass on Justin Fields, and then they land Aaron Rodgers with this draft class, Patrick Surtain at 9, you had Javonte Williams, the running back, PFF's RB1 out of UNC. Quinn Miners was a pick we love at 98 out of Wisconsin Whitewater. A lot of exciting picks. And then Jamar Johnson, a top 50 player on PFF's draft board out of Indiana at 164. I'll say this, Mike, I'm going to come to you on your opinion on this draft class overall, but Vic Fangio is a kid in a candy store, my friend. He's got so much talent in the secondary. Fuller, Callahan, Darby, Surtain, Johnson, and then Justin Simmons. They're doing what we said about the Browns, the Bucks, the Ravens. Just throw everything you can in the secondary. Have depth at that, at that part of the defense more than anywhere else.
Yeah, it's like I said, this is a big swing. And the Williams pick, he was the #1 running back on PFF's draft board. Miners pick, we said the only below average positions on the roster, center and quarterback. They get the second-grade center on our draft board behind Landon Dickerson, a guy we think can probably step in and start right away for you from what he did at the Senior Bowl. And then the Baron Browning pick, 105. Not much separates, in my opinion, a guy like Baron Browning, 74.8 pass rushing grade last year when he did rush the passer, versus a guy like Joe Tryon, both just athletic freaks. You're banking on development as a pass rusher. We talked to him on the 2-Point Drafts podcast, said a lot of teams are looking at him on the edge. That's where he's likely going to start out in Denver. And it's that's a good developmental prospect at 105. That's where I take those guys, not back into the first.
You guys covered a lot of it. It's really going to always come down to the quarterback, but I can't wait to see how the secondary shakes out, right? Yeah. Because we always reference back in the 90s when the Vikings drafted Randy Moss and the Packers are like, how do we cover Randy Moss? Draft corners left and right. It's the Patrick Mahomes factor in the AFC West. How do you stop the Chiefs? You have to load up in the secondary. The depth chart is loaded. I can't wait to see what Fangio does with those guys, but man, Broncos got to figure out quarterback.
Yeah, quarterback, the biggest question mark for the Denver Broncos. Some question marks on the Las Vegas Raiders draft class. We're going to jump there now. They got a C draft grade according to PFF. The first pick, Alex Leatherwood, one of the bigger reaches of the first round. So much of a reach that Mike Mayock shows up to the press conference and says, hey, I know this is going to be controversial. I know he's not viewed as the consensus, top 20 player in this draft class. He grabs him at 17. Apparently, quote unquote, Tom Cable's favorite offensive lineman in this draft, ahead of Penei Sewell, ahead of Rashawn Slater. There were quotes that came out that said Tom Cable liked Alex Leatherwood over those guys. And then after that, Trevon Moehrig is a pick we really liked. He was a top 20 player on PFF's draft board, the safety out of TCU. And then some interesting decisions after that. But after you get past your first 2 picks, your top 50 picks, that's where really your draft grade's going to come through. When you look at Alex Leatherwood, based off the talent that was still available, Tevin Jenkins, Walker Little, Sam Cosmi, all players that we had ranked ahead of Alex Leatherwood.
Yeah, it was just a misunderstanding of value in the draft. That guy is not getting taken before probably even pick 43. He probably could have, or at least you take the chance on that guy being there at 43rd overall. And they said they had him above Penei Sewell in this draft class, which, hey, I question your scouting prowess. If you're out on a limb on your own, having him above someone like Penei Sewell, but that's kind of straight up in their MO.
Right.
They had the second most draft capital over the past 5 years. They're not in a good situation. They had the second most draft capital the last 5 years. They are dead last in that division in terms of prospects going forward.
And almost every one of those high picks have been a massive reach by the consensus board.
Yeah.
They evidently just do not give a crap about anybody else's board. It's we are ranking the guys in this order, and we're just going to take them in this order. We don't care that we could potentially get them another round later, and maximize that value. And even if they were hitting on these picks, it would be bad process because you're leaving meat on the bone by not taking advantage of the fact that nobody else agrees with you. But they're not even hitting on them. Mm-hmm. So it's like the worst possible scenario.
That is like the worst thing about this whole thing. It's like if you're a gambler and you have a negative EV thing, but you get lucky, right? You're at the blackjack table, you're up a bunch. And of course, I can see somebody being like, oh, this process is great, keep going into it, and then it loses over time. They're playing a negative EV system and losing and still continuing to go back to the well, which to me, I just think is a level of, I don't know, arrogance might not be the best, hubris, something like that, which is not going to win in a division where you have the worst quarterback prospect, assuming Rodgers heads to Denver, and like the worst roster to go with it.
The Raiders are not going anywhere unless their secondary looks something like the Broncos. I mean, that's the bottom line. They're not going anywhere unless they can cover and stop the Chiefs. I mean, forget about even just the Chiefs twice. They can't stop an average passing attack in the NFL. So they should be building their team like the Broncos are. It doesn't matter if it's your top tackle on the board at 17. They shouldn't have even been in that position. They had a good offensive line last year. They didn't keep it together this offseason and had to force a need pick at 17 to get the number 40 player on our board. So the secondary is the issue. They've invested in that spot. They haven't really hit on any players there. But you have to keep swinging because hitting on players on the back end there is far more important than just getting your top tackle on the board at 17.
I mean, it's a testament to being overconfident in your valuation and also just not taking all the data available to you. Mike Mayock is well aware that Alex Leatherwood is a consensus reach. He's well aware that Penei Sewell and Rashawn Slater are more widely viewed as better offensive tackle prospects, and yet still you go out on this limb. That's bad process, and people are like, you can't grade this draft. What if Alex Leatherwood becomes a Hall of Famer? It's still bad process. I think the analogy I make is that when you're in blackjack and you hit on 18, just because the dealer flips a 2 sometimes, like I would say Colton Miller has been a little bit of a 2 for them. That has been a hit. It was still bad process. It's still bad process to take a player that not everyone views as a highly drafted player.
There's 2 elements to this whole stacking players, player evaluation, then drafting them, right? There's one, are you right? Did you evaluate this player right? Is he going to be a good NFL player? And then 2, did you maximize the value where you could have drafted him compared with where everybody else has him? So if you think if you're able to pick a Tom Brady, right, a 6th-round pick who's going to be a Hall of Famer every year, if you have some kind of Midas touch and you can get that done, you don't draft that guy 5 rounds ahead of where everybody else was. If you know that everyone else has him in the 6th round, take him in the 5th every year. Make sure you secure him, but don't take him number 1 overall because nobody else is going to touch that guy. If you don't have an appreciation for where everybody else is drafting these players, you're just wasting a potential edge.
And it would be one thing if he had any sort of, the Raiders front office had any sort of track record of hitting on these. They don't. Right. They don't have any track record of hitting on these. So to buy into it now that Leatherwood's the one, it's like, well, all your free agent decisions, all your draft decisions outside of one Colton Miller, who was developed into a slightly above average tackle at the 15th overall pick, that's your one hang your hat on first round pick. I think all of them.
That stat you mentioned, Mike, about them having the 2nd most draft capital over the past few years and still at the state their roster is in is just absurd. And I don't even think the Alex Leatherwood pick is their worst one because at least this attacks a position of high value.
Want a great stat? They've had 6 first-round picks in the last 3 years, right? Collectively, that group has provided a negative WAR.
Oh, my gosh.
Like, wins above replacement has been negative. They've had a bad impact on the team versus just throwing 6 guys out there that could have taken those spots.
And what I was saying there is, like, this isn't even their worst pick they've made in recent years because at least it attacks a position of high value that could eventually maybe hit like Colton Miller did. The other picks they made with Jonathan Abrams, a box safety, Josh Jacobs, a running back, those aren't only being overconfident in your valuation, you're also hitting on players that don't make a lot of money on their second contracts and therefore aren't market valuable. Steve, I know you had one more comment.
All I'm saying is they also drafted, Trevon Merrick at safety, Divine Diablo, a safety that they're going to turn into a linebacker, Tyree Gillespie. I mean, Jonathan Abrams, their first-round pick from 2 years ago, at safety. So they're either admitting an error or just attacking a position with value. But again, corner is just a bigger issue. I'm just not excited about what
admitting an error is a good thing. But not using that admission to go back and readjust your process is the problem.
There
right?
you go.
They're sort of, again, they're half doing it right, which is saying, yeah, okay, we screwed this pick up, we made a mess, but then you're just repeating the process that made the error in the first place.
All right, let's get out of Las Vegas. Let's go to Los Angeles. Los Angeles Chargers, they had an opposite draft. They had an A-plus draft, according to PFF.com, adding a ton of talent. I've said this before. Rashawn Slater, again, is not going to get talked about like some of these other first-round picks, but at 13, massive value for the Los Angeles Chargers, one of the best offensive tackles in this class coming out of Northwestern, even after opting out of the 2020 season. He's also got positional versatility. Dude can play up and down the line of scrimmage. And then maybe my favorite pick of day 2, if not, definitely day 2. My favorite pick of day 2, Asante Samuel Jr., the cornerback from Florida State, going to them at 47, a perfect scheme fit, a fantastic player, a top 20 player according to Sam Monson, I think a top 25 player on PFF's draft board. Another really good selection for the Los Angeles Chargers. Mike, your thoughts on this A-plus draft?
Yeah, Slater, only 5 pressures allowed back in 2019, about as NFL ready as it gets at the tackle position, and they needed that. That was the hole. You had revamped the entire interior. Brian Blog on the right side, the one hole, left tackle. You get maybe a more NFL ready player than even Penei Sewell. to fill that need.
Wow.
And so he comes in there, solidifies that, and then Samuel, like, for that scheme, also incredible NFL ready in my opinion. Like, the way he sees the game, very reminiscent of his father. And it's like those guys who dads played corner or defense back in the NFL, they've been watching this stuff since they were 3. Like, they've been watching it all their lives. They understand the game of football at a high level. You see it on Samuel's tape again and again. And for that scheme, perfect fit.
Samuel has one of my favorite plays on any cornerback's tape where it looks like just a gimme interception, right? Quarterback is late, throwing a crossing right over the middle of the field. Samuel's just standing there waiting for it to come to him. But the reason it looks that ridiculous is because Samuel read this play like absurdly early from like the backside, realizes that there's going to be nothing in his zone, and is immediately looking to the other side of the field for the crosser that he knows has to be coming into his area, and is just standing there waiting for it. And he has to basically wait for the quarterback to process the reads. Quarterback finally gets there and just pitches the ball right to him. But the ability to understand that play is all over Samuel's tape, right? Not only does he have one of the fastest sort of T-steps and bursts on the ball you're going to see, but he also shows consistent ability to react faster than the receiver, which you can only get if you understand what's coming. It's a mental thing, which shows that, like, it shows that he's in the tape and he understands the game in addition to having those physical skills.
It's a vision head start.
He broke up a screen from off coverage last year, a wide screen. That doesn't happen.
Exactly.
That just doesn't happen.
All right. I want to dig into another pick. You know, a lot of people want to know, from your opinion, because I know you're a big Josh Palmer guy. Tennessee, he's at one of the bigger consensus reaches of day 2. A lot of people did not like Josh Palmer like you did. Why should Los Angeles Chargers fans be happy about Josh Palmer at 77?
No, he's the production does not match how good he actually was on the football field. And he, at the Senior Bowl, the highest grade of any receiver there against press coverage. Gets off the line of scrimmage, is explosive at the line of scrimmage. Ran a sub 7.3 cone at 210 pounds, 6'1", 210 pounds. That's an excellent number. That's what translates, Eric. Correct me if I'm wrong. Size and 3 cone is 2 of the most projectable numbers at the wide receiver position, because that is turning, that is route running, that is being able to sink your hips and run a dig, run a post, those sort of things, and not lose speed. Palmer was excellent at that on tape. He just had one of the highest off-target targets rate of any wide receiver we've ever scouted. 7 years of doing this. Just they didn't have a quarterback that could hit him there at Tennessee. So that's why he peaks with a career high 484 yards back in 2018. Never eclipses 500 yards in a single season. But again, he can get open. He beat Patrick Surtain better than anyone beat Patrick Surtain this past season. His numbers against top corners as good as any wide receivers in this draft class. It's just you're not going to know it through the raw yardage figures, because that's a symbiotic relationship between the quarterback and him. He can't do it all on his own. He's going to have a guy who can hit him, though, now this year.
Plus athlete at the position. Played with Jarek Guarantano in Tennessee, who was awful. So, like, that's like the thing about players away from the football, and that's why we've seen over the course of a few years where our consensus and ending up drafting draft position end up being the biggest variance for cornerbacks, wide receivers, because it is very dependent upon, even if you beat somebody, you have to still have somebody to deliver it to you. Or if you're a defensive back, if you play a bunch of crappy quarterbacks, sort of the other side of that coin as well.
You also just want to get Justin Herbert receivers that are going to help him win down the field. You want to get him as many downfield threats as possible. Palmer can win down the field, and you need an aggressive Justin Herbert. You need a guy that's attacking using that big arm.
I'm very skeptical of the Chargers for a couple reasons, in that I don't like second-year quarterback having to have a offensive coordinator both years different, right? But they've done, aside from that, and look, they won 4 straight games under Anthony Lynn. You felt like they had to trade up for that offensive lineman in round 1. They didn't have to do that. That's another good break for them here. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that went against them going into the offseason, but they've hit the ball out of the park in free agency and in the draft. So, at plus 600, they're a pretty good value, I think, in the AFC West.
Make sure you go to PFF.com to check out the draft profiles for Rashawn Slater, Asante Samuel Jr., and Josh Palmer. And while you're there, promo code DRAFT30. 30% off any PFF subscription. We're on to Kansas City. Kansas City's draft class, a B+, according to PFF, with their first pick. After trading, obviously, for Orlando Brown Jr., trading that number 31 overall pick for Orlando Brown Jr., they grab Nick Bolton at 58, Missouri linebacker that I know Sam is a big fan of. Mike loves this guy. I'm a huge fan of his tape. It is some of the most fun to watch tape, and I hate to use that, but fun to watch tape we see in this draft class. After that, Creed Humphrey, a guy that played center at Oklahoma, could probably play guard in the NFL. Those two picks right there. I mean, yes, they got Orlando Brown Jr., didn't have that first-round pick, but I like Bolton and I like Humphrey. Maybe not the best positional value, but they maybe fill needs there too.
Yeah, Bolton, the highest grade linebacker over the past 2 seasons, led the SEC in stops during the regular season each of the last 2 years at Missouri. Ridiculously productive, and it's like, yes, he's not the high-end athlete that the NFL usually drafts high at linebacker, but you don't necessarily have to be to still make an impact. And if it didn't show up too much in the SEC, I don't think it's going to show up too much more in the NFL with the way those SEC offenses are trending with the athletes and the speed and the type of schemes they're running, the space they create. So I feel good about that pick there at 58. And then kind of the strategy of getting Orlando Brown with that first-round pick, but then still getting a center who you feel like can start right away in Creed Humphrey with that 63rd overall pick that they got. Or I guess the 58 pick was what they got from Baltimore, but the 63rd overall pick to then get that at the back of the second round, a guy who can step in and start right away and just, we've said, just solidifying holes along that offensive line. They did it as well as anyone this offseason. Then in the 6th to get Trey Smith, who everyone's passing on because of the injury, I guess not injury, blood clot issues that he's dealt with throughout his career at Tennessee. If he can be healthy, like that's a steal of the draft.
I think it's crazy that a team that was in the Super Bowl, a team that only had 6 draft picks, right, could come out of this with, I mean, if you count the tight end and the wide receiver and 11 and 12 personnel, come out of this draft, if you count Orlando Brown with 4 starters, that's a pretty solid haul for a team that has been in 3 consecutive AFC title games. I think Bolton starts before Willie Gay. I think Creed Humphrey has a shot to start over Austin Blythe. And then, what the Chiefs have really struggled with, relative to the rest of their offense is red zone stuff. And you have the Noah Gray to be the first, number 2 tight end to be good for them since like Anthony Fasano, and then Cornell Powell, who is a bigger wide receiver, box out guy.
Anthony Fasano.
That can actually be decent for them.
We just got to keep an eye on this going forward. I mean, they've invested so heavily in the offensive line, both short and long term. I mean, just short term, they're going to be good. They're going to be top 10 offensive line next year, maybe better, and they'll lock these guys up long term. They're going to be good. Just worry about the playmakers, worry about the secondary and the defensive line. Those are some big places, and not because Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce aren't awesome. It's who's 3, 4, 5, who's the insurance plan there, what's the insurance plan in the secondary, and how are you building around Chris Jones on that defensive line in the future. It's just they're going all in on this offensive line this offseason.
It's something they will benefit from, and this is from the business perspective of the NFL, is that how much more money is coming into the NFL and how much the projected cap is supposed to increase in 2022 and 2023. I was talking to someone, big Chiefs guy in Kansas City radio, and he's like, man, you look at where the salary cap is supposed to be in 2022 and 2023, and when they're going to get away from the Frank Clark contract potentially, they could potentially have this opportunity to re-sign some of these guys. So I do think that, you got to watch it. But
the cap goes up for the other 31 teams too.
Sure, no, it does. But I do think in terms of like retaining some of this talent and making some power, making some power moves there.
They probably are going to be an active team in free agency. Melvin Ingram's available, Casey Hayward's available, Richard Sherman's available. Like they should be considering, as Steve said, in the secondary on the defensive line, using that extra that they have. Although they are cash strapped, from having to pay out a lot of bonuses and things like that to get under the cap in the first place.
All right, let's go ahead and pick teams to win the division AFC West here. I can't imagine we'll see a lot of differences. KC.
Reminder, Eric's not picking the winner. He's picking the best bet.
What is Renner picking?
I'm picking the winner. I think Aaron Rodgers goes there. Aaron Rodgers goes there. They're the favorites.
If Rodgers, I don't think they're the favorites, but I do think that they're easily under plus 200 if Rodgers goes
So looking at where the odds are right now, according to betting markets, right now you can, right here, Kansas City Chiefs minus 305 to win the division next year. That is bigger than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to win the NFC South, who are the defending Super Bowl champions. Then you have the Broncos at plus 525, Chargers at plus 600, and then the Raiders at plus 2,000. What's the?
I guess the Raiders at 20-1. Then
stop. All right, let's go ahead and jump now to the. We're going to jump to the NFC West. We're going to jump to the NFS when we get back. We're going to get to the NFC West. Look at the grades there. One of the lowest GPAs of any division here. Looking at some of the grades for the 49ers, Cardinals, Rams, and Seahawks when we get back.
Football is, in my opinion, the most complex sport. It's not even close.
Chris Collinsworth has more.
I'm Chris Collinsworth. I work for NBC Sports. I am a broadcaster.
Football.
Aaron Rodgers. Everything in business is speed related. Somebody's going to get there with machine learning, with AI. We want to be the first ones.
PFF analyzes football in more detail than anybody else on the planet.
And that is some
Best NFL rivalries, Bears, Packers.
Bears, Packers.
Packers, Bears.
Rodgers played some of the best football we've ever seen.
Don't want to see that pass rush. There's always a real buzz at the start of football season. And for us, that excitement is part because we really improved our systems. We're embracing machine learning. We're embracing AI. We present information that we've gathered to the teams, to the people that are playing fantasy football, to the fans, and we put perspective on the game of football. So let's take a play, for example. Aaron Rodgers throws a perfect pass down the field, which clangs off the receiver's hands, and it bounces to a defensive back trailing behind.
And it's intercepted.
The box score will tell you that Aaron Rodgers threw an interception, a huge negative. PFF, on the other hand, is going to give Aaron Rodgers a great grade. So what we're trying to do is evaluate.
Wearing Sweat Taylor, man. If you thought there was better apparel to be wearing during the 2021 NFL Draft, you were wrong. Use promo code PFF-SWEAT, PFF-SWET for 25% off your order. Look at the lower third right there. If I didn't spell it right, PFF-SWEAT, SWET for 25% off. You want to look like me, which I know a lot of you do, you're going to need to go to sweattaylor.com to make that play. And if you want to look like Renner,
you
which
I grow a mustache for about 6 months.
6 months? Let's go hear from Sweat Taylor. Sweat Taylor. Couldn't thank them enough. They've been everything for us so far. I've been a big fan of the Sweat Taylor.
Comfy.
They've been comfy, man.
Yeah.
The comfort,
Pillows,
the comfort,
blankets.
the professionalism. I might wear this to dates. I don't know. Like I gotta. Like, I will.
I cannot wait. Cannot wait to hear.
That's not in the rest of your
My
wardrobe.
Tinder lifestyle might get better with Sweat Taylor. You know.
No, let's talk about it.
No, let's not. NFC West, baby. Let's get to the NFC West. Some draft grades for the San Francisco 49ers. That's where we're going to start. San Francisco 49ers obviously duping everyone. Mac Jones, betting favorite to be the San Francisco 49ers pick. It was at one point minus 350. Minus 350, Mac Jones was going to be playing for Kyle Shanahan and the San Francisco 49ers in 2021. Fool everybody. They go after Trey Lance instead, the North Dakota State quarterback at number 3 overall, and then grab Aaron Banks, guard out of Notre Dame, Trey Sermon. They trade up for Trey Sermon, which lose some draft capital there for a low-value position. But if you're looking at Trey Sermon, one of the few guys that you get on day 2 that can actually play all 3 downs, really like his contact balance, really like what he can do from a force miss tackle perspective. Mike, your take on the San Francisco 49ers draft, you gave it a B.
Yeah, it's the Lance pick. Like I'm okay with the Lance pick. We obviously would have gone Justin Fields, but I have no issue with drafting Trey Lance 3rd overall. It is a swing for the fences, and now you could swing and miss. Well, sometimes we swing for the fences, but also you win Super Bowls if you hit home runs on guys like that. So respect the play, respect their decision to move heaven and earth to do so. Now it just comes down to developing that guy and seeing what Trey Lance can be. The Banks pick in the 2nd round, we had a different sort of idea of how good Banks was. To me, the pass protection was the issue. He goes to the Senior Bowl. He's the third lowest graded guard in the one-on-ones. Just not the most fleet of foot. Now, he's solid in the run game. Very technically sound, like Notre Dame breeds, solid offensive linemen. But 48 overall, you want a pass protector. And now, they do a good job of protecting their offensive linemen in pass protection there in San Francisco. You don't necessarily need A++ pass protection. The run game is more important to Kyle Shanahan and that offense in terms of what that offensive lineman can do. But still, that's a little rich for me. I feel like you can find guys like that a little later on guard.
Can't wait to see what they do with Trey Lance. I mean, there was a celebration on the set here because it was Trey Lance over Mac Jones. I don't know that that's a slam dunk that he's definitely going to be better than Mac Jones. Mm-hmm. There's not a great there's not a great football reason other than Lance does add more with his legs. But I mean, if you're talking right now, and Lance's accuracy is far worse than Mac Jones. And if we look back at the Super Bowl, and it's not always one play that makes you change things, but Jimmy Garoppolo missing a post route that would have won them a Super Bowl, like if that's the thing that's been eating at Kyle Shanahan, well, Mac Jones is more likely to hit that than Trey Lance next time it comes up. So
not at his pro day, he wasn't.
Not at his pro day. He nailed it at his pro day. I mean, look, Trey Lance isn't a slam dunk. Justin Fields isn't a slam dunk. So nobody is.
Who is a slam dunk?
Trevor Lawrence.
Okay.
Trevor Lawrence is a slam dunk. That's it. That's who the 49ers should have gotten. So, look, I'm excited to see what Trey Lance does in Shanahan's offense, how they build around his skill set. But I'm sitting here saying, he wasn't the clear guy to take over Mac Jones if it was just down to those two.
You don't think the rushing aspect is a clear delineation between the two of them?
I absolutely think it is.
But you would have rather had Mac Jones for that.
I'm not necessarily saying that. I'm just saying it's not as clear as day. And I just want to make sure we're not coming across as this consensus across the board. Everybody at PFF, like, you idiot, you're an idiot if you would have taken Mac Jones. You're not an idiot if you would have taken Mac Jones.
I think you can make a compelling case that each one of the three alternatives that they had to choose from, Justin Fields, Trey Lance, Mac Jones, you can build a case that says each one of those guys becomes an extremely good quarterback in Kyle Shanahan's offense. Now, largely that's because Kyle Shanahan's offense is a cheat code for quarterbacks. Like, he has Nick Mullins posting the same career yards per attempt figure as Aaron Rodgers, right? That guy just creates magic for quarterbacks. But it's an interesting decision, and I agree with Steve that it's not a slam dunk. But whatever it is, it's almost like a referendum on what Kyle Shanahan thinks is important at the quarterback position, or what he thinks can be built on or fixed. Like, Trey Lance's big negative right now is a low sample size and inaccuracy relative to Mac Jones or Justin Fields. But we've just seen a quarterback in Josh Allen who came into the NFL with that inaccuracy issue and has fixed it, right? Josh Allen last year was one of the more accurate quarterbacks in the NFL. So maybe Shanahan is looking at this and saying, all right, the only negative this guy has is something we can fix. So let's take him. Fair. You have incredible plus athleticism. You have a big arm. You have the ability to read defenses and distribute the ball the way I want it done. And I can remove the only negative in his game, and we're golden.
Taking Mac Jones at 3 would have been a mistake, though, because he went at 15, and you were at 12, and then you took three first-round picks and a third.
That's why. That's an issue.
You don't know where would Lance go. You have no idea where Lance would have gone if the Niners didn't take him.
And that's my issue with this entire discussion is that the Niners put themselves in a position where anybody, and then and we misevaluated Fields relative to the market, you'd have to say, but they put themselves in a position through trading up, through sort of going on tilt at the quarterback position, through desperation, to where none of their decisions would have made sense. And I think everybody being so surprised and sort of angered at the idea that they could take Mac Jones, who the market was right about him on first blush. His pick was 18 and a half. It went 15. So they totally overreached there. The issue for me now is when he takes Lance and everybody's like breathing a sigh of relief. Did he take the wrong quarterback still? And I think at this point, I agree with you, Steve. The difference between all three of them is so minuscule that the only conclusion I think you can come to here is that the trade-up was a bad decision.
Am I wrong to think that all of us at number 3 overall would have taken Justin Fields? Steve, would you have taken Justin Fields at number 3? And I think there was definitely an argument. I am not in the consensus that, there was way more of an argument between Trey Lance and Mac Jones than there is between Trey Lance and Justin Fields. I do think that it depends.
I don't think that's necessarily true at all. Really? I can definitely see a reason the teams would be scared of Justin Fields the most of the three.
Oh, really?
Because I think
you would take Fields?
I would have taken Lance. I think they ended up in the right call. But I agree that it's really close, right? I don't think you can look at this and say, it's definitive in any direction. I think all we're seeing is evidence that the 49ers think differently, right? Mm-hmm. They don't think it's three guys that are very close together and they could have gone in any direction. When you trade up that much for a guy, presumably it's been the same guy all along, and presumably you therefore think there is a big difference between him and the two that would have been left if you didn't draft him.
I just think that's a lot of overconfidence.
Absolutely.
When there are three options available.
But I'm saying we should at least recognize that the probability is they think differently in terms of where these quarterbacks are ranked than we do.
Because if Mac Jones goes at 12 to the San Francisco 49ers, I think we're all sitting here saying they're the favorite in that division. And to me,
well, that wouldn't change. Why would that change the odds, though? Mac Jones versus Jimmy Garoppolo? I don't think that changes anything necessarily.
I think so, because it gives them a higher floor, right? Like Jimmy G's problem is not ineffective play, it's injury, right?
Yeah.
And having
I think they're more scared of the injury stuff than the inaccuracy.
And they should. He's started 48% of games over the last 3 years.
They responded to that by moving up to take a quarterback who's going to have a play style similar to Cam Newton, who has not been able to stay healthy over the past, decade or so. To me, this whole process seems clustered in a way that I'm just not. I don't know.
There's a lot of moving parts to it, right?
I'm not buying into that.
It's a great conversation. I think another thing I wanted to add to there, I think there was some narrative that, if you add Mac Jones there, when they were the favorite to add Mac Jones, a lot of people said, is that even an upgrade over Jimmy G? Yes, it is. Mac Jones is more accurate than Jimmy Garoppolo. He's going to be more cost controlled. I still felt like if they did go Mac Jones, it would have been an upgrade over Jimmy Garoppolo.
I don't know.
I really don't.
Not immediately.
Really?
Anyway,
I'm
short
saying,
term.
okay.
But again, I don't know that Trey Lance is an upgrade to Jimmy G.
Do we know anything?
Right. But again, the running quarterback, a guy that you could build your running game around, assuming Shanahan's going to do that, raises the floor of the offense. And he doesn't have to be as good from a pass game perspective. But I'm assuming they're going to say, hey, Trey Lance, go grab 600 to 800 yards on the ground because it's part of your skill set. If they do that.
And it buys you time. This is all a question of time scale, right? A guy that can bring that kind of rushing ability and rushing element and a higher floor to your offense gives you time to fix the things that are wrong with him as a passing quarterback. If he didn't have that and he was just a substandard passing quarterback right out of the gate, suddenly the clock is very much ticking on how long you can give that guy in the job. But if you raise that floor enough, now you can work on that stuff in year one off season, maybe even year two off season, like Josh Allen, and there's enough hope there that you can suddenly turn him around.
Let's have the same length of conversation about their second round pick, Mike. Aaron Banks. No, just kidding. Let's go to Arizona Cardinals draft here. The Arizona Cardinals received a B-. According to PFF, their draft class gets a B-. At 16, they grabbed Zaven Collins, Tulsa linebacker, and then at 49, a guy that we've liked for a long time, since his 2018 true freshman season at Purdue, Rondale Moore at number 49, grabbing uber athlete and Marco Wilson, a guy that we liked way more than the consensus, and Tay Gowan at 223. A lot of picks to like here for sure. Your thoughts on the B- grade, though?
Yeah, the Collins pick is just kind of a head scratcher.
Yeah,
I'm not sure their track record of drafting hybrid linebackers like a Collins suggests we should think any differently. Like the Hassan Reddick pick never panned out. Isaiah Simmons, they couldn't even get him to see the field until later on in his rookie season. And now that's obviously too early to judge. But it's like you're going to have a plan with Collins of how to use him because he's 6'5", 260. He is a different breed at the linebacker position. And he's not going to be an exceptional coverage linebacker. It's like that size plays as a blitzer. It plays a little bit as a tackler, and it should theoretically play with helping him take on blocks, even though that was not his game at Tulsa. So if you're going to draft a linebacker highly in the first round, we were higher on guys like Jeremiah Uzi-Cormo, and obviously you're not going to play him next to Isaiah Simmons, but I just don't see that role, whatever it is for Zaven Collins, being a super difference maker that I'm going to take him 16th overall and pass on some cornerbacks, especially with their quarterback room.
Well, and they just spent free agency money on Jordan Hicks, who's a linebacker for them. Isaiah Simmons was a top 10 pick last year. It's like there are teams in this draft that don't realize that you don't play three linebackers on the field very much anymore, and it's like, you're kind of creating a glut there, and it didn't make a lot of sense to me, especially given that I know he was rising up draft boards, but it was still an overdraft at 16 by a huge margin.
But he's rising up draft boards because people are getting intel that the Arizona Cardinals like him. Yeah. It's their fault. Yeah. They changed the market that you're playing, which means they still overdrafted him. So yeah, I agree. I mean, I agree with Mike. It's an overdraft. I like the versatility aspect with Isaiah Simmons. Don't forget J.J. Watt's there this offseason. Chandler Jones is coming back. Budda Baker is like the classic, safety slot hybrid a couple years ago. So they have a lot of versatility, but cornerback 2 is the biggest question mark.
Yeah.
There's cornerback opposite Malcolm Butler. That's the biggest question on this team. So a guy like Tay Gowan has a path to maybe play. If he's as good as you evaluated him, as we evaluated him, Mike, there's a shot for him here.
But it's also like I evaluated him 69th overall. Love the player.
Sure.
69th overall player is not someone you expect to be a starter. It's more, there's probably about 50 or so good players in the draft class. So that's still kind of, that don't hang your hopes on your 6th, 7th round picks.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, usually players that are like 69th overall don't have the kind of pathway to a starting position that he has. So it's definitely a gamble relative to, top 20 player or whatever. But he has a better shot to get an opportunity than a guy normally ranked in that spot.
And they haven't shown the ability to develop cornerbacks. I mean, like Byron Murphy was a 2nd-round pick just a couple of years ago, and he hasn't really played all that well. And
Sam, how do you expect them to deploy Rondale Moore very quickly before we jump over to the Rams?
I quietly love that landing spot for him because they've kind of had that role in the last couple of years. It's been the way they force-fed Larry Fitzgerald targets. So
he's their leading screen target.
Yeah, so he can just still get the ball because that guy can't get open anymore because he's old and slow. So they've been force-feeding him like bubble screens just to make him still a part of the offense. Now you're going to be feeding those passes to a guy that runs like a 4.2, can jump out of the gym, is one of the most electrifying players in the entire draft. That's like tailor-made for him to have an immediate impact role without having to do too much more than he's been used to doing.
No team in the NFL since Cliff Kingsbury took over the Arizona Cardinals 2 years ago has thrown more wide receiver screens, and the leading receiver on those screens is Larry Fitzgerald. I think Rondale Moore, an upgrade for that role. Let's jump to the Los Angeles Rams. You gave this draft a C. They did not have a lot of draft capital. They're a team that has not had a lot of first-round picks of late, and they don't have a lot of first-round picks in the future either. They grabbed Tutu Atwell, Louisville wide receiver, at 57 with their first overall pick, and literally, they don't even have another pick in the top 100. They do not have another pick in the top 100. Bobby Brown is a pick I like at 117. I talk a lot about grabbing guys that can start on the interior at 117. Big fan of that pick. But outside of that, I don't love the Tutu Atwell pick. I'm not a huge fan of Ernest Jones. C, great. I kind of feel you.
Yeah. So the Ernest Jones and Bobby Brown picks, those guys are solid run defenders for their respective positions. And we've talked about the Rams scheme a lot. Brent Staley, what they do, they got to have the front seven stuff to run. So those picks, understandable where they got them, 103, 115, not valuable picks, obviously. And so getting run defenders there. Guys who can still make an impact, especially within that scheme, I'm fine with. What's the Atwell pick? That just, you have an established 3 wide there. And Van Jefferson, who you drafted last year in the 2nd round, and then Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. So he's not going to see the field in that. You have Deshaun Jackson, who you just brought in. And now, so he's not going to take over Deshaun Jackson's role. Deshaun Jackson is Deshaun Jackson. He is the guy who created that sort of undersized speed wide receiver role that Atwell is trying to fill. So maybe you're trying to get him to learn from Deshaun Jackson to ultimately be him. But I don't see it. Like, I did not see it on his tape. He's 155 pounds. Deshaun Jackson was like 165, or like at least like 10 pounds heavier coming out, and faster, and produced actually down the football field on a college field back when that was not like, back when the spread didn't even exist in the mid-2000s, back when he was playing on the outside himself. And so I think they envision Atwell being the similar player, but man, it would be unprecedented for him to be that guy.
This is going to be a fascinating team-building study here, right? The Rams haven't had a first-rounder. I'm scrolling since 2016, right? Since Jared Goff.
It's going to be 7 years in a row.
And so what happens now? So in 2018, it's all third. Their first pick was in the 3rd round. We're waiting on just Brian Allen's the one guy from that class who might be a starter this year. In 2019, we're relying on Taylor Rapp to start at safety and David Long to start at corner. And they're both still question marks right now. Last year's class, it's going to be Van Jefferson, who you mentioned, or Terrell Burgess. So you're getting like 1 or 2 contributors per draft class, and this looks like something similar. Is Matthew Stafford worth it? Is Jalen Ramsey worth it? Those guys are fantastic players, Ramsey especially, but is Stafford that big enough upgrade over Jared Goff that all of this is worth it? A ton of draft picks, but just not a ton of impact players coming from the draft since 2016.
Yeah, the Rams process makes it look like they believe in themselves as far as pick for pick more than anybody when it comes down to we don't think we can get rid of first-round picks because we can hit on the Jordan Fullers and we can hit on the Cooper Kupps better than anybody else. I think that's pretty noisy, and at some point, especially in a division as tough as this one, it might come back to bite them.
Let's now jump to the Seattle Seahawks, the last team. We've gone through all
30 picks too.
We've gone through 31.
Oh, this is easy.
Yeah, Seattle Seahawks, baby. We gave them a C for this grade here. The graphic looks completely different because it's only 3 picks. It's incredible. Dwayne Eskridge, receiver out of Western Michigan, comes off the board at 56. And then at 137, cornerback Trey Brown of Oklahoma. I know a guy that I like those last 2 picks. Yeah. 137, Trey Brown. 208, Stone Forsythe. That's good value. Problem is, I think a lot of this, what's driving the C grade, is the fact that they just don't have any picks. They traded 2 future first rounders for Jamal Adams, and with their first pick of the draft, grabbed Dwayne Eskridge, Western Michigan wide receiver.
You have to factor in the fact that one of those first rounders goes to paying a safety. That's a tough. It's a tough ask in today's NFL because it's the least one of the lowest paid positions in the NFL, and you just gave a first rounder to pay a guy there. So have to factor that in. But I do like the Brown selection. I do like the Forsythe selection. Forsythe, to me, probably the day 3 steal of the draft.
Nice.
Like that guy doesn't. I am floored that he got to where he did in the 6th round. Guys with his physical skill set just don't make it there. Like an athletic, tall, long tackle with some pedigree of pass protection in his play there at Florida. And Tessa had the 3rd most true pass sets of any tackle in the country this past season. So, yeah, Forsythe's a great pick. It's just the Eskridge one. Like a massive he's going to be another guy, not as much as Atwell, but he's a one-trick pony. He's going to be a limited dude that is your speed threat. That's what he brings to the table. But he also has a speed threat with bad ball skills, which is not my type. Yeah. Like if you're going to throw big plays down the football field, you better haul those in because if you're going to be dropping a lot of those, it's just they don't come very often in those high variance plays to be messing them up like that.
I mean,
I'd rather not.
I like Eskridge to be a little bit more than that, but I think even with that context, drafting him where they did in the 2nd round just feels like a giant reach. Like if you just told me that those were the 3 players they got, I think they've come away with 3 good players or 3 players that I like a lot. But the fact that it's like a 100-pick overreach for Eskridge. Even if you work on the basis that I'm a bit higher on him than Mike, it's still a massive reach. Like I would have had him in the 3rd round somewhere. So it's like a full round higher than I think most people would have taken Eskridge.
That's going to do it. Team draft grades for all 32 teams. Now, last thing with the whiteboards here, we are going to pick 8.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to pick the NFC West here. Before we do, the NFC West odds right now, as I scroll, the Los Angeles Rams are the favorite, tied for the favorite to win the division with the San Francisco 49ers at plus 180. So they see it as the same odds. The Rams and Niners winning the division at plus 180, Seattle at plus 300, and then Arizona Cardinals at plus 600 coming in the rear here. Let's go ahead and flip over these whiteboards.
I don't feel great about it. I don't feel great about anybody in this division.
Rams,
really?
Yeah.
I'm trusting the best quarterback in Russell Wilson, but man,
You're also getting really good odds, Steve.
Oh, so it's a good bet too.
You're getting odds. All right. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to wrap this thing up. Some bold rookie predictions, some consensus Super Bowl picks, all that type of stuff when we get back.
Football is, in my opinion, the most complex sport. It's not even close. I'm Chris Collinsworth. I work for NBC Sports.
NFL rivalries, Bears, Packers.
Bears, Packers.
Packers, Bears.
Rodgers played some of the best football we've ever seen.
Don't want to see that pass rush. We present information that we've gathered to the teams, to the people that are playing fantasy football, to the fans, and we put perspective on the game of football. So let's take a play, for example. Aaron Rodgers throws a perfect pass down the field, which clangs off the receiver's hands, and it bounces to a defensive back trailing behind.
And it's intercepted.
The box score will tell you that Aaron Rodgers threw an interception, a huge negative. PFF, on the other hand, is going to give Aaron Rodgers a great grade. So what we're trying to do is evaluate not necessarily the result or the stat of the play, but what really happened.
Positive that ball location. That's incredible.
We can now predict future performance based on the data of the past.
Things like our passing grade will generally correlate.
Seems like
also.
We have the data, we have the analysis, and now we have AWS and the computing power and skills of that team. We're going to truly change the game.
Welcome back to the PFF NFL Draft Recap Show. Ready to rip it up. We've gone through all 32 teams. All 32 teams, we gave grades to all 32 draft classes. If you didn't catch that, go to pff.com right now. We have our draft grades. You can also, while you're there, promo code DRAFT30. DRAFT30 gets you 30% off any PFF subscription now through tomorrow. Less than 48 hours to use that promo code on pff.com. Now, up next, Steve has something nice for us here. Steve, former minor leaguer. We bring it up all the time. We bring it up, I mean, too much probably. Former minor leaguer, you made some comparisons. The top 5 quarterbacks drafted in this class, you made some comparisons to former, or I don't know baseball enough, but some pitchers here.
Don't even read the names.
I won't even read the names. You tell me who these pitchers are.
Well, this was from one of our listeners. He said, "Let's do this just to piss Sam off."
It's working.
So make some baseball comparisons.
Working.
So I went Trevor Lawrence as Roger Clemens, and let's go down Justin Fields being Dwight Gooden. Those guys both came in 1984, power pitchers with control, stars. Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields. So they're like Clemens and Gooden from the 80s. You got Zach Wilson. Here's your one modern day pitcher, Trevor Bauer, little undersized, but really good tools. Nice arm, does some good stuff with the ball. That's what Zach Wilson does. And then Trey Lance, I couldn't come up with a comp. And then Eric yells out, how about Jack Morris? Jack Morris is the guy from the 80s, the winningest pitcher in the 1980s. Maybe that's going to be Trey Lance for the 49ers, but Jack Morris would win ugly sometimes, So Trey Lance is going to win with the run game as well as the pass game. And then Mac Jones, he's got to be Greg Maddux. He's got no arm, has to win with control. It's all off-speed stuff. It's a finesse guy. So Mac Jones, Greg Maddux, that would be his high-end precision finesse pitcher. Got that, Sam?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
I agree.
No, don't give me any thoughts on this. I feel like dude, for people who watch baseball, that's probably some interesting stuff. I don't watch enough of baseball. Neither does half of America. So
I feel like you should have said an okay boomer there at one point.
I don't know. Oh, how old are those pitchers? A lot? Are they old?
Some 80s.
Yeah.
A lot of 80s pitchers. And then Trevor Bauer.
Before my time. Steve, we're going to stick with you. I want to get to some bold rookie predictions. I know Mike has a hot one, but give me your bold rookie prediction after the start.
Anything Kyle Pitts isn't really all that bold, but I'm going to say he's so good, he phases out Julio Jones. Julio Jones becomes less of the offense in Atlanta. 1,000-yard season for Kyle Pitts, who becomes the guy with Calvin Ridley in Atlanta.
Okay, I was going to say, phasing out Julio Jones, not too bold. 1,000 yards, a little bold. I'm going to say Jamar Chase breaks the rookie receiving record. His former teammate, obviously you just said it, 1,400 yards last year. I think he is the dude.
17-game season makes it a lot more likely. The prop for Kyle Pitts, by the way, in the marketplace is over 900 yards this year, which seems a little bit high. Our fantasy projections have him about under 700.
But tight ends usually don't transition that smoothly.
That's right.
I was battling a little bit to get my bold rookie prediction, but after Urban Meyer said that Travis Etienne's only going to be a third down back, I'm going to double down and say he's going to be the leading rookie receiving yards back. I think he's got most receiving yards of any rookie running back, better than Najee Harris, better than Javonte Williams. In that offense, you've talked about how Urban Meyer is going to use him. I think he leads all rookie running backs.
Is that bold? I think he's the favorite.
He probably is the favorite, but I like his bold. I'm countering off of Urban Meyer. Eric, you got a bold prediction?
Trey Sermon, 25-1 to be Offensive Rookie of the Year. I think the 49ers are going to be run first, much to George's chagrin, and Sermon.
Bold predictions.
What's that?
You just 25-1 is pretty bold.
You gave the best bet again.
No, but
it's a bold prediction.
He said it's going to happen.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
Yeah,
okay, that's bold. Sorry.
Yeah. And he's betting it.
Tay Gowan is going to start games at cornerback for the Arizona Cardinals this year.
Hey.
I like it. Pick 223.
Yep.
I love that.
It seems more of a futility argument for the Cardinals than it does
next year, going right down the line, we're going to pick a surprise Super Bowl contender, which is interesting coming right after the draft. There's a lot of reasons, like not all these players are going to be super impactful, but I'd like to go it now that the rosters are largely set. Your surprise pick for Super Bowl 56. So not the Chiefs, not the Bucs. Give me a surprise pick for the Super Bowl champions here in 56.
Not even a surprise anymore. It's the Browns, the number 2 PFF roster coming into the draft. Plus an A draft. You got to look at the Cleveland Browns. They're loaded across the board. Year 4 of Baker Mayfield, MVP candidate this year. Go Browns.
All right. Mine is going to be the Miami Dolphins. Got better in a lot of respects. Not just the quarterback position, where he's going from year 1 to year 2 with Tagovailoa, and a year more removed from that catastrophic hip injury. Offensive line, a lot of guys going from year 1 to year 2, looking like it's gotten better. Wide receiving core got massively better with the additions of Will Fuller, Jalen Waddle, completely revamped there. And then defensively, Noah Igbenogany going into year 2. Obviously, you added Jalen Phillips, Javon Holland as well. There's a lot of now talent for a team that was pretty damn good last year, just really held back by quarterback play.
My surprise pick here is the San Francisco 49ers, and that's including whether or not Jimmy Garoppolo or Trey Lance start here. I feel really good about them getting one thing. Positive regression for injuries, man. They had so many injuries this past season. If Jimmy Garoppolo can stay healthy, and if he can't, they have now a really good insurance with Trey Lance there if they want to develop that offense. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I want Nick Bosa coming back. I think San Francisco, my surprise pick here.
What an absolute noob in the betting. You know Shanahan gets him to the Super Bowl.
She's going absolutely
pees himself there. But Trey Sermon, 25-1, will win the Offensive Rookie of the Year.
That might help the Super Bowl chances.
I'm going to go with a team that used to battle it out with the Niners in the 90s for the NFC supremacy. I'm going to go with the Dallas Cowboys. Dak Prescott. Our guy Mike McCarthy, former Super Bowl winning coach. Defense doesn't matter. Dallas Cowboys, 25-1.
You're all doing it wrong. You guys, can each of you be wrong?
Oh, he's going.
I don't know where he's going.
All 32 teams work with PFF.
Wow.
PFF is winning the Super Bowl yet again.
We win again.
Sixth straight year.
That is a surprise.
Is that a good bet, Eric? What's the odds on
It's 100%.
PFF winning the
We're going to
Super
do it.
Bowl? I
It's
like
pretty
it.
good.
Minus
I like
$1 million, we're going to win.
Oh, man. That's going to do it, man. That is the 2021 NFL Draft Recap Show. If you've been along with us for, 20, 25, I don't even know how many hours of live coverage. We really appreciate 22. Producer telling me in the air, 22 hours of live coverage for 2021 NFL Draft. A lot of people to shout out here. The production team, the PFF helmet, Sam, Steve, Renner, myself, Eric. I'm not thanking myself, but a lot of people contributing to this show. I think I'm gonna shout out some others here. Give me the stand here, Todd. Give me the stand. Editorial for PFF.com doing so much. Graphics for PFF.com doing so much. Charles Miller, Mark Chichester, Ben Cooper, Danny Cross, Gabe Garcia, Director of Social Media. There's a lot to thank here. PFF, this is not just these 5 guys. Very little. We do very little up here. It's a lot of the people behind the cameras and so forth. Big shout out to everyone at PFF, including Data Collection Team, Chris Collinsworth, Neil Hornsby, George Chahuri, Director of Content, Ben Stockwell, managing the Data Collection Team. A lot to thank. This is not possible. 22 hours of live coverage is not possible without those guys. It's possible without me, but it's impossible without those guys. Until next time, until 2022, fellas, that's going to do it. The 2021 NFL Draft Recap Show.